You ready? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm ready anytime.
Okay, good. Hey, good evening, and thank you for coming out to our Planning Commission meeting this evening. We're going to go ahead and get things started. First item on the agenda is opening and approval of minutes from our meeting on October 12th, 2017.
I move we approve the minutes from October 12th, 2017.
Second.
Aye.
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 All right, moving on. Number 2, public hearing and request to rezone 0.64 acres of property at 845 West, 200 North, from R120, single-family residential, to healthcare, HC healthcare zoning district, brought before us by Wellness Properties. We'll turn it over to Lyle and Andy for a little bit of staff input.
Okay. As a means of introduction, we're looking at the property just west of the bridge over the train tracks on 200 North. And currently the property has been used as essentially a residential treatment facility for several years, I believe about 8 years if I've got the history at least close to accurate. And part of that existing service, we have people who are dealing with substance abuse issues that are, we'll let the applicant explain it a little bit more detail, so forgive the generics, but along to a certain portion of their rehabilitation where they're in a residential situation just living to continue their treatment. The applicant has a desire to, thank you. The applicant has a desire to add a detox component to their services. And with that, staff believes it would be appropriate to consider the healthcare zoning district in order to accommodate that additional use and service at the property. And so they are here to explain in further detail on that. But for the Planning Commission's consideration, again, we're looking essentially for a recommendation to forward to the City Council this evening. It is a public hearing where hopefully we can get some input regarding the use. And from those who are in attendance, I believe there are several here for that. For the Planning Commission's consideration, again with the rezone aspect, we're looking at how does it fit both with the general plan at this location in this area specifically, and something that we generally do also for your consideration with the healthcare zoning district generally comes with a development agreement. So it'd be staff's recommendation as we're listening to the public hearing this evening and the input from the applicant to consider items that the Planning Commission might like to see in a development agreement and give that direction to proceed to put something together if that's appropriate to move forward with the proposed use. With that, I'll pass it back to the Commission and suggest we open it to the public hearing. Again, the applicant does have representation here this evening as well, and make sure we hear from them.
Okay, just to clarify too, as it stands right now, there is no development agreement, correct?
It currently exists under a conditional use permit
Okay.
from a previous ordinance.
All right, but nothing that's been added to it or anything like that as it's brought before us this evening. Okay. All right, with that stated, let's go ahead and open up our public hearing on this item. Please do me and us a favor and limit your comments to 3 minutes. And let's try to keep our comments original and pertaining to this specific agenda item. So we'll open the public hearing as of now. Don't be shy.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you want to
You'll approach the mic.
I have a question, just the contents of the conditional use permit that they're currently under, I'm not aware of where that is. The contents of that conditional use, is that available?
We can find that.
I'm sure that it is.
The conditions of that conditional use are fairly pertinent to some of the things that we have to say about it. So, if there's anything we can find in those details, that would be very important.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
No, we're still
That's a good point.
bringing our microphone forward here.
Over to the mic.
All right.
because there's hundreds of people at home watching us right now.
Since I've been here since day one, I can put up a few things.
Sorry, it's rare that it's ever unplugged.
So my name's Tyler Dallas. I'm the owner and operator of Cold Creek Wellness Center, the rehab. And my partner's here, Jeremy Pope. He's the owner of Wellness Properties that owns the property in question. There is no conditional use permit for what we're doing today. We came in prior to any zoning ordinance in place, so we were essentially grandfathered into what we're doing today. The zoning was changed abruptly, as soon as we were here. What we're looking to do is add additional services to what we offer now. The treatment world is changing and has changed dramatically since we came. Hospitals no longer detox people fully. You're in and out in 24 hours. You can show up there as a meth addict, and there is no medical protocol to detox you. So you're sent through the emergency room. They say, have a nice time in rehab. Most of the other rehabs in the state are now applying for a social detox license through the Department of Human Services. We've opted not to go that route, hoping to get the zoning change and offer a true medical detox. We don't want non-medical staff watching people detox, seizure risk, all kinds of life-threatening risks. We want to have 24-hour nursing staff, doctors, people on site that can truly care for the people. We're going to keep doing rehab there, so that's not going to change. I think people have thought, there's no cars there anymore. We've been operating so long that the house is in need of a facelift, so we're going through remodel. All the furniture's been taken out. The carpet's coming out soon. We're just hoping to make the zoning change, comply with a development agreement, and be able to offer the detox services where people can come detox in a nice home environment and do treatment. We could go the other route and to have the safety of our people in mind and offer a service that's head and shoulders above what everybody else here in Utah is doing. We have great medical staff already on our team, so we need to add one registered nurse. We already have an MD and an advanced practice registered nurse full-time with us. So.
Okay, thank you.
Would it be okay if I asked a couple questions, or he would come back?
Why don't we wait until we come
Okay.
back to that? So, thank you. Next up.
I was here when that facility opened.
Could you please state your name?
Elizabeth Bodkin. I was here when that facility opened. We were concerned. I'm one of those houses that was there a long time before the detox place or whatever it is. The drug house came in, and as neighbors, we would like to be able to be in our home, in a home environment, and not have a medical facility in our neighborhood. I didn't buy a house with a medical facility in my neighborhood. And now we're having to change an area or a piece of land that was deemed residential when we bought that. Now it's going to be a medical facility. And the problem is, because this is regulated legally by the town gets to deem whether that is going to be acceptable in my neighborhood or not. We don't have any details. It's not like this facility came along and sent out flyers to even the home that is directly behind them that have 9 little children growing up there, that they're going to change and now move patients in there that have drugs in their system. They never even had they weren't even have the consideration to go next door and tell them, hey, there's going to be people that you might not want your children playing in the backyard. I mean, this facility only cares about making money, and I wouldn't say that they don't care about helping people, because I'm sure they do. But they don't want to help people in their neighborhood. They want it in my neighborhood and helping people in my neighborhood. It's a business. And it's very aggravating that they are now trying to make their big business bigger in my neighborhood. And we had to swallow what was given to us 9 years ago, and now they're forcing something bigger down our throat again. It's going to change, and it's aggravating. And the fact that we get no information from them at all is aggravating. It's like the homes around that facility, they don't even care about the residents in the other around them. I've been over there twice in the last 9 years. One time they set a dog out there barking for several hours, and my husband flies at night and sleeps during the day. I had to go over there and say, you can't leave your dog out barking all the time. Well, he's good for the residents. That's what I was told. Well, I can't have him barking right by my window. So this is just another part where they're not considerate. There was also a gunshot. I'm sure you realize that there was a shooting at that facility. That's a question.
Yes.
So there is some concern about that. I think we would be more, we would feel less concerned about it if we actually knew the details of what was coming into our neighborhood. And I don't know why we aren't given a flyer or something that says this is what the facility consists of, this is how it's going to impact your neighborhood, these are the precautions we're going to take, which is standard procedure, I guess, in that we get nothing. And it's like they would come in and just shove it under the door, and maybe we wouldn't hear about it until it was over. And that is very aggravating. And like I said, we just feel like, oh, this is just a bigger pile that we're going to have to swallow. And it's, you know what, I know it's necessary, but if it was in anyone else's neighborhood, everyone would feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell me when you're ready.
You're on.
Okay. My name is Jason Largey. I live, I don't have my laser pointer, and I left all my other papers that I have. First off, when I moved into the house 7 years ago and I heard about it and heard this type of facility is totally covered by the Americans with Disability Act, the Fair Housing Act, and we tried to fight it when it came in and we couldn't do anything about it, so I didn't study anything, didn't learn anything, shame on me. Now that there's looking to expand the use of the facility, I've done a lot of studying on not only what healthcare zoning means, but also what the law says about this type of facility. So there's nothing that I'm going to say about whether this facility could be even more in my neighborhood, my neighbor, that it doesn't matter. It's totally protected, I get it, under the guises of the Americans with Disability Act, the Fair Housing Act. What its protection does not allow it is changing of the zoning of the area it is in. So currently the house resides in single-family housing. That is the zoning that it is currently under. The Kaysville City Code states that a family consists of 2 or more persons who are related by blood or marriage, or up to 5 persons who are not so related. I have observed myself. I have read many things online. I don't think we can get records because there was no requirements for that, of 8 to 12 people at a time in that house walking back and forth to activities, doing things. I do not believe that for 8 years they have complied with the current zoning of the property. Now they're looking to get more permissions. They have not demonstrated that they currently care about the zoning and the law they have. They have not been abiding by it. August 1st, the state of Utah released new law and code requiring licensing for this facility. The Department of Justice, and so the Department of Justice, the Department of Housing and Urban Development have ruled on this a lot in Florida and have said that no, they don't get any extra permissions in the zoning because they're protected this way. So they have to follow the current zone. So that's That's there, and we're not discriminating if we require that. Where you are discriminating is if you require additional things like inspections or licenses or other things that you don't require in general, unless they are generally required. The state of Utah now requires all of these residences to be licenses, and there is a massive amount of additional information like records of all of their residents at all times available to inspection, the numbers of personnel. As far as this type of residence goes, I think they do a pretty good job. I've read quite a bit now about these types of residences, and I have not observed or been aware of many of the problems that I see other places. So I think they run a pretty good facility currently. With the new laws and the licensing, now they can be inspected to ensure that they are not violating the definition of a family in a single-family home where they're at, which means they're capped at 5 people, not the 10 that I read all over the place. You're one of only 10 people at a time compared to other facilities. Were they to become healthcare zoned, that restriction would no longer be in place to limit the people, so they could continue to operate as now or expand. I've also heard rumors of problems with parking and the traffic on 200 North and all those kind of things. And I didn't understand how healthcare zoning could do anything. Well, let me find out where it is. Section 1717.7 of the Kaysville City Code states that there are no lot size or yard requirements except that where a lot in the healthcare district abuts a residential district, which is the case here, the yard abutting the residential district shall be at least 20 feet. An existing building may have the 20-yard requirement reduced to the yard requirement of the abutting residential zone if the reduced yard area contains only landscaping. All of the neighbors contain only landscaping. They could pave the entire property and have a parking lot in the back under healthcare zoning. And I don't care what they say. I don't care what they tell me they're going to do in it and how great their plan looks. Once it goes healthcare zone, it's not coming back. It could become anything legally allowed in a healthcare zone at any time. They could do, once they have the zoning, they could tear down what they have in place and do something else. Now, if there's some agreement that's made, but that does nothing to the next owner or the next owner. We're not going to get it back. My kids have to walk past that if they want to go to the park, if they want to go to the gas station. I don't want it to be a business. I don't want a business in my neighborhood. And I want them to comply with and prove that they comply with the current laws before they get anything else. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to be brief, but as...
Could you please state your name?
Oh, yes, Rebecca Pug Meyer. I understand this is a business that they're bringing in, trying to make money, but my business is my children, my family. I'm a mom. That is my business. And I bought a business, a home, a residential single-family home in the proper business district for my business of being a mother. And this business is great. I think these businesses need his company. It serves a purpose. People need help. But he bought his business in the wrong location. I brought my business to the right location where it's zoned for families, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Suzan Longman. I work in a hospital, have worked for really a long time in a hospital, so I have some experience about patients who are using drugs of abuse and what their bodies go through physiologically during detox. I have some family experience with this. I have an uncle who, as he was going through detox, he escaped a locked facility. He stole a car. He assaulted my grandmother as my sister and I hid in the bathroom. And these are good people that are altered, and they are not themselves. They are not good people when they are altered. And I think we've got to really differentiate that when people are using drugs, they are not themselves. They have a drug that is like changing the way that they would behave not on that drug. And I have some real questions about what medical detox means to Cold Creek. What does that mean? What is it going to look like in that facility? We had the same frustration in 2008. We could get no information, so you assume the worst. You do the research, you know, like the worst case scenario, and that's what you assume because we get nothing. Cold Creek has not been forthcoming with information for the neighbors. But I'd like to know what drugs are going to be administered during the detox that counteract these physiological effects. How are those drugs going to be delivered to the facility? How are they going to be stored? What medical supervision and monitoring will those patients have? Are they going to have a physician there 24 hours? Are they going to have their hearts monitored? What kind of monitoring is going to go on there? What protocols are going to be in place if a patient escapes the detox? I know that's not something anybody wants to think happens, but it happens. I've seen patients that are much stronger than they really are in the throes of that detox, and it takes 4 or 5 men to hold them down. So what's going to happen if they escape? If they escape the house, they're over the fence, they're in the yard. What's the protocol going to be that Cold Creek has to inform the neighbors that that has happened? How are they going to make that determination to inform without violating HIPAA for the patient? What are their requirements to HIPAA? I'd like to know what percentage of their patients in detox complete detox. I mean, how many of them leave halfway through? I've read reviews online that are shining, and I've read reviews that people left in 2 or 3 days. I'd like to know how many of these patients are self-committed to rehab and how many of them are court-ordered to detox. Cold Creek is a revenue-producing entity, and they want to change their operation, and that has potential to change the dynamic of our neighborhood. And that is our city, our neighborhood, where our families live, where we have our greatest investments. And as our neighbor, they have a responsibility to have a conversation, to respect us and our investment and our lives there, and answer these questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is John Pug Meyer. I am the owner of the house that backs up right to Cold Creek, and a father of 9 children. One of my biggest concerns is when we moved into this neighborhood a little over 4 years ago, we made several attempts to get a hold of Cold Creek just to do a little, find out what it was all about. Went over there, called. They never bothered once to get back to us. Not once. We've had problems over there where we've had to go over into the yard to solve situations, knocked on the door. No one comes to the door. No one responds. My concern is that the same thing is going to happen again. I have people close to me who have been on drugs, and I know that they're good people and they need help, but people on drugs, and as they're going through detox, don't act normal. They do irrational things. If someone is doing something irrational and they're in my yard or in my house and I'm trying to get a hold of Cold Creek to see what they're going to do about it, will we continue to get the same response that we got before? Nothing. They didn't care. They never once tried contacting us back. It was pretty clear to me that they don't care about what anyone around them thinks. Detox is big money. The only reason they're doing this is because they can make a lot of money. It is very expensive to go through detox. They will make a lot of money. That's what they care about. They don't care about the people around them. They don't care about getting back to us. They don't care what our feelings are. They made that very clear with them not even wanting to respond to more than several attempts to try to get a hold of them when there were situations. No response at all. Why is it going to change? I've got 9 kids at home who already are having a hard time sleeping because of the fear of this, and they know that when we've had problems that they don't care, they don't respond. These people do need help, but they need to be supervised by people who are competent and who care enough about the people around them and realize the risk that potentially is there. I know, like we said, we all assume the worst, but we have to assume the worst. We have to assume that the worst is going to happen, and what are they going to do? And past behavior has shown that they won't do anything. They won't respond to you. They won't call you back. They won't answer the door when there's a problem. To me, that is a huge problem. And I would just simply finish by saying, honestly, each one of you ask yourself, you want this house next to you? If they were going to build the house next to you, would you do it? Would the owner of Cold Creek, would he put this house next to his house? I promise you the answer is no.
John, can you clarify something for me just real quick? Have you had Cold Creek patients in your yard? Is that what you said?
No, I have not had them in our yard, but when we tried contacting them about different issues and questions that we had, they never responded to us.
Okay, but you didn't have any of them.
No one
in
has
your
come.
yard. Okay.
No one has come into my yard. My fear is that if that situation were to arise, we have history of showing that knocking on the door or calling them does no good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
My name is Susan Harris. This is the third time that I've been in this room regarding this property. I was here the first time when they built the house, which was a bad idea, on 200 North facing it, because who would want to build a house facing 200 North when there was a thoroughfare going on there? And we tried to not have that happen, but that obviously did. Second time was when it was the owner sold it to Coldwater, and we had no choice in that matter again because of the ADA, and here we are again. Now I know that there is not one of you that were sitting in those blue chairs back then, but that's kind of the point too, is that you guys make a decision, and I know just not you, I know it goes to the city council, but you make a decision that happens for the here and now. But everyone in the community lives with it for the years and the years after that. And our society kind of is to the point where when you do customer service, you just do what's in front of you. I'm sure you've all had that experience when you go somewhere and all they do is worry about what is here right now, you're bugging me, whatever. They won't do a little extra here, they won't do a little extra there. And I'm kind of asking you to think about that. Because once this zone changes, then who knows where it can go. That is a big scare. Now, the other healthcare zoning that happens in the city is not abutted to 5 homes. It's out kind of on its own. It has empty areas, and this is even a worse scenario. If you have medicated, people right there, we're next to an on and off ramp. We're across the street from a convenience store. In doing some research, a convenience store is a huge magnet for problems. You tie that into then a drug rehab house across the street, on and off ramps, and a park, and you've really got a disaster going on. In some of the goals of the city that I was reading in the packet that you guys received, it was to regulate intensive uses that create traffic and for public service problems. We know that that's a problem. That was one of the things we said is parking. 200 North, that was 9 years ago. It is now a nightmare, as they well know. I have come down 200 North to turn onto 900 West, and I'm facing a car. Because one, they either think they need to get into now the lovely Maverick that's there, or they're trying to get into Coldwater Creek and they're coming up the turn ramp. Also, home occupation should be located, but it should not change or interfere with the character of the residential area. You change that one little piece right there, it definitely changes the area. Another thing that was there in the packet is one of the things that it says, and I'm on the 17.17-5, that says accommodations for persons with disabilities shall be granted if it will not create a fundamental alteration in the land use and the zoning scheme. Well, that's exactly what we're doing here. Is that my 3 minutes? So I just want you to consider the long-term use here. This is a bad idea. I know that people need this help, but they don't need to change this to a healthcare facility or that zoning in this area. It's a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Heidi Rich, and I didn't prepare anything, but I just want to stand in opposition for this, because once you change this I live also in that neighborhood, and once you change it out of a conditional use, it can't go back. And we, like they said, have bought our homes to be residential neighborhood, not next to a medical care facility. And my experience is the same. I've worked with patients that have been altered in altered states, and I don't want that in my backyard. I don't want to worry about where it is. I've worked in treatment facilities. Patients escape, patients get out. I don't want that in my backyard. I know this is a money-making profit. I've talked to friends of theirs, and it is money. It is all about money, and I don't want the conditional use pulled. So, thanks.
Hi, thanks for listening tonight. I know that's not always easy. My name's Jeremy Pope. I'm the manager of Wellness Properties, who owns the real estate. I don't operate Cold Creek, but I'm very familiar, obviously, with it. But I think first, maybe to clear up some of the comments, and I think the Planning Commission's aware of them. We operate under the current condition that we're in right now, as mentioned, under ADA and FHA. We've always ensured the proper licensing. We've been there for 9 years. There's never been any issues. Some of these that I'm hearing tonight are the first I've ever heard of them, and the first that Tyler, who's sitting next to me, has heard of. I would say that people who are up here saying all we care about is money, I find that interesting, because if we assume the worst in everybody, I think we all know that would be, the tables could be turned, right? I could assume every one of them is a drug addict and addicted to a prescription drug or some other substance, and I don't do that. I think that it's important to indicate we are not trying to grow here. I think sadly, maybe people in Kaysville don't recognize we are the gold bar standard for treatment. If you were to go and ask throughout the industry, there's been numerous problems. I've had a facility in my neighborhood. That facility has since gone out of business because it was run by somebody who was in it just for money. And in my experience, if you're in it just for money, it doesn't last. We are in what we call the helping business. We are a volunteer program, so nobody's court-ordered to our facility. They're there because they want to be there, and the same would hold true for detox. Under our current circumstance, we could offer detox. I think that's important to call out. We don't need to be here tonight. We could start detoxing patients right now under social detox without any further approvals from the city or zoning changes, and that's what we're trying to prevent. We don't believe in that because we want it to be done as a medical detox with the proper licensing and the proper medical regulation. And that's how we've always operated. The comment was made earlier that we haven't complied. We are inspected randomly and regularly by the state. We have surprise visits often that check our record compliance, that check our operating compliance, our safety compliance, our health standards. So we have never failed, and that's what's allowed us to stay in business. We truly are about the quality of care, and I know that's hard to see, and I can understand some of the concerns when maybe there's a lack of fully understanding what a bad facility could look like. There's a lot of those examples out there. We are trying to help people here. We don't want to grow to do detox. We just want to be able to provide that additional service under medical detox instead of social. When you send them to a hospital, unfortunately in the state of Utah, patient brokering is still allowed. We are actually at the head of trying to get a lot of regulation and laws brought into the state of Utah to make this a more regulated industry. And what
is patient brokering?
So we'll send a client who wants to come to our facility, and we'll send them to the hospital to detox. And a lot of these doctors who run these medical detoxes at the hospitals are also on the payroll and or have a relationship with another treatment facility. And they will get paid to send patients to them. Mm-hmm. So we'll go to pick up our client, and they're gone. And they've been sent to a treatment facility that is not necessarily the best for them. It's a treatment facility that was willing to pay a doctor to get them. There's a lot of this underbelly that's going on in this industry, and unfortunately, oftentimes it's applied to everybody in the industry. We don't participate in that. We're advocating for laws to be passed to prevent that. And so, another reason for this is that the quality of detox, as Tyler mentioned. We'll have clients come out of what's supposed to be medical detox, and honestly, they're not in the condition they should be, and we end up having to socially detox them more than we should. And this would allow us to make sure the detox is done properly. And it's people who want to be there. These stories I hear of hiding in bathrooms and people hurting other people, we're not court-ordered. People want to be in treatment. If they don't want to be there, we'll call their family and or we'll arrange for transportation. And we've done that. We've had people come to our program and they want to leave. And we obviously explain to them the challenge of going through treatment is it's difficult, but the reward in the long term is a wonderful reward. And if they don't want to do that, we've driven people to the airport so that they can make arrangements to fly home. We've taken them to their homes that are right here, in Kaysville. And so it's not the type of facility that I'm hearing described here, and maybe that's just lack of understanding, or maybe that's just, I don't know what that is, but that's not how we operate. And speaking to the fear that maybe it's instilled in neighboring properties, we've heard opposite from other neighbors. We have a lot of good relationships with neighbors around us. I'm a product of addiction. My mom was a 16-year-old mom who was an addict, and I grew up with a mom who was an addict until they took me and put me in foster care. And my mom got clean, fortunately, and it was done in a way that I felt like could have done better, and that's what motivated what we're doing today. Yes, we're a for-profit organization, but we are about quality first, not profit. I just put money in to cover payroll just a few weeks ago. We operated for 2 years in the red. This has not been a for-profit venture in terms of just focusing on profit, profit, profit. So it's agitating when you hear that because there's a lot of sacrifices that have been made. We've really done this property up in a good way. If people who remember 9 years ago when we took it over, it was going into foreclosure. It was a weed patch with a makeshift barn and an above-ground pool. It was in terrible condition. And if it was left for a residential property, that's what it would be. Nobody wants to live on this 200 north-facing property and raise their family. And once again, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, I'm just telling you the state the property was in when we found it. We've really worked hard, and we did have an open house. We invited people to come. We had very few people turn out to it. So, I'm not here to obviously create argument and resentment, just to really clarify what it is that's trying to be accomplished. This would actually put fewer residential clients in the facility because we only have so much room. So it's not like we can add a detox bed or two and still have just as many residential clients. You can't do that. We're constrained to the property that we're operating in. And this property could, frankly, I think it would very easily get a general commercial zoning. It could be a 2-story building. It could be a convenience store. It could be a lot of things. I think that this actually has been a well-maintained and good property. So I think if there's additional questions operationally or more details about how the facility runs, Tyler would be the appropriate person to ask about that. In terms of just the real estate itself, I could answer any questions you guys might have.
And does Tyler work inside of the facility?
He is. He's the operator of Coal Creek.
Okay.
Yes.
I think after the public hearing, I've got questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Appreciate it. Are there any? Sure.
I was going to just sit back and be quiet, but guess what? Okay, I live right there close.
Can you state your name, please?
Suzy Smith. I live right there close, and I have a dirt road that some of these folks come down and stand and smoke. And I've had to go to the house and say, hey, look, I don't smoke. I don't appreciate your residents coming and smoking and dropping all their butts. And you need to get that cleaned up. I've seen people leaving this facility, pulling their suitcases, going up over the viaduct, and I just kind of chuckle because it's like, okay, they're running away from the facility. They can't handle it. I feel that if they're going to have a commercial business, they should move to a business district and not in a residential area. It's not fair to us that have families for them to move in and run this type of a business and subject us all to what they're doing. I was at home when that shooting started, when that shot was there. I was very appalled to think that we were paying our police department to sit in their driveway for over a month while they were, who knows who was paying what, but I thought if they needed that type of security, that should have come out of their pocket and not our police force. I thought that was mishandled completely. Would they come sit at my house if somebody shot at my house for over a month and just sit in my driveway?
Maybe.
I highly doubt it. I would be shocked if they did. I mean, you guys are stretched. I know you don't have the manpower to set two people, not 24 hours for over a month, to protect a commercial business like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tonya Gibson, and we are actually the property that's just east of the facility, and we've lived there about 2.5 years. And
there, that one.
Yep.
Yes.
So I would say of all the neighbors, we have the easiest access to the facility. We go to the park often. We walk by, and it's a very well maintained place. It's better maintained than our house, but anyway. So I think the idea of addiction is a very widespread problem in the United States. It's a problem in Kaysville. It's a problem anywhere in the world, anywhere in the United States. The idea that doctors and hospitals are getting paid to send patients to other facilities that might not be the best is an egregious problem, it sounds like. Most people who do have addictions do not have access to the type of facility that is next door to us. And if that is the best facility or not, I don't want to dispute that, but let's say that it may be the best type of treatment that somebody may be receiving. Most people don't have access to that type of treatment. We bought a home. I'm a stay-at-home mom. We have 7 children. We bought a home we could afford. It's not an ideal place to live on 200 North, but Kaysville is a safe community. And we were looking anywhere from Draper to Kaysville, and this was a house that was fit our family, fit our needs, and was something that we felt like we could afford. Not an ideal place as far as the location to the busy road, but we can't afford to move. We cannot afford to move. And all of the families, whether they can or they can't, us personally, and I know I'm not on the city council, I don't have a vote, and whatever my personal situation may be is perhaps irrelevant. But the facility that exists there next to us, they have a big, I don't know, it's in one of the canyons. I mean, it is a beautiful facility where they also have, like, I think it's a live-in. Is it live-in? They have apartment complexes in Kaysville that it's male and female residences. They have the financial resources to relocate to another place if they want to provide that extra type of service, which, but we don't. And that fence, the families that are around the fence of Coldwater or Cold Creek, there's 24 children. There's 24 children, and there's 40 people. So if there was a situation, all of us are vulnerable potentially, and it is not a risk that I think that I wouldn't be willing to take if I had a say in it. And so I'm hoping that my opinion, my situation, would be weighted along with the other families and the situations that they're in, and the children and the families that would be affected by the change of the zoning. Now, from what I understood in the zoning map, the only healthcare zoned property in the city of Kaysville is that there's an assisted living facility. Is that right? That's it. So I still don't quite understand the change in the zoning, what that could do into the future as far as what other facility could be there if they decided that they were going to be moving or selling the property. Could that property be leveled, and could something else, more like a business front, could that, like an assisted living or something, could that be built there in the property?
That's contingent upon a development agreement and how stringent that said development agreement is.
So that, but it could.
Well, it could, but
it could.
It's contingent on a development agreement. So.
Okay.
And your 3 minutes are up. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we ask what the current occupancy limit is for the property?
We'll get into that when we bring them back up. We have another question here.
My name is Jonathan Kendrick. I live on the 700 West Circle, Kitty Corner. A lot of the people that have spoke tonight are my friends. They're my neighbors. And I would like to start off with an appeal to you guys as well as to the commission, that it sounds like there's a lot of fears that have been here. And part of that is that a lot of the neighbors have tried to contact, have had concerns, want more information, and they don't feel like they can get it, that you're not available. And the second part that worries me a little bit of that is it sounds like you could go forward with this, whether the zoning is changing or not, and you could do detox with not, but you wanted to do it the right way. I would like to think that the right way is listening to those people, your neighbors, that are around you, to opening up and being able to talk to them. The second fear that I've heard from a lot of the people that have spoke tonight and the people that I've talked about, and a fear that I share myself, is a fear of the future. Now, this facility might be managed really well, but management changes, standards change, ownership changes a lot faster than zoning can change. So if we have the opportunity to not change the zoning now, I think that's something that we need to weigh heavily and look at. If you look at this suburb, this is Utah's hometown, right? Kaysville, this is what it is. If we change it and start commercializing and putting commercial buildings there, that's not a residence in Utah's hometown. We're a city of distinction. If we change it, we're just like everybody else. We're not distinct. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this? Well.
My name is Dave Gibson. I also, like my wife, I'm residing just east of the facility there. And I'd like to echo some of the things that have been said so far. Being a residential neighborhood and having neighbors, often, right, there's scuffles or things that happen. And in my experience, which is not vast because I'm not too old yet, but often if a neighbor's doing something, or if I decide to do something that may be bothersome to my neighbor, communication is the best way to do that. And I feel like I've never met either of these gentlemen. I'm sure they're wonderful people. We moved into the property knowing about the facility and that they were doing what they were doing. And frankly, having family members of myself that have been affected, and myself being affected by addiction, was quite proud to say, hey, you know, we feel comfortable with this. It seems like what they're doing is appropriate for a residential community. The fact that they mentioned that currently they run it with, you know, admitted patients, for lack of a more precise definition. But I guess I feel frustrated because I'm coming here tonight, and maybe the past few days was the first that I've heard about this change, and I don't even know what it means. People talk about social detox, medical detox. I don't know the difference between those two, and what that means, what the risk is. You know, if my neighbor's going to buy a pit bull, and they say, don't worry, Dave, he's a really nice pit bull, he's really great with kids, you know, that may be true. I'm not against that, but it may not be true. And I just feel like we need more information. and just maybe more of a neighborly communication with it. I don't want to hate these people. Again, I believe that their intentions are, I can only assume that their intentions are legitimate, that they want to help people stuck with or affected by addiction. I would just hope that there'd be more communication as well. Also, the long-term effects, I'm curious about that. It sounds that the zoning can't be changed. Is there any way that a stipulation could be placed if we somehow say, okay, medical detox, that's fine, but if you decide to, a year from now, sell the property, does it retain that zoning? Is there a way to change that zoning back to residential zoning on a stipulation? Is that possible? I don't know if that's a question I could ask you guys or if that's something that we need to figure out. But I feel like there's not enough information yet, and especially being right next door, even if there is a minor risk with medical detox being upgraded, again, having children that play outside right next door, like certain risks I'm not willing to make, frankly, especially if it's a business that has means to provide the service elsewhere. Whereas, like my wife mentioned, we can't afford to move. Like, maybe someday we will, but we can't afford to move. And so these kind of things affect us and the residents, it seems to be far more than it would be the business. And I don't think it's, am I out of time?
Yes.
Talk a lot.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts.
Okay.
Medical versus social detox, and just more neighborly interaction. I wish they would have come to us before we'd have to come and talk at City Hall. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kara Jeffrey. Our house is also one of the homes that line the fence with the facility, the current facility. Most of my concerns have been addressed by the other residents, but I did have just a couple of things that maybe we can think about. So I like Dave Gibson. I also believe their intentions are great. I think a facility in Kaysville is a perfect idea. I had my brother passed away from a methadone overdose, so I absolutely believe in the need for detoxing and for rehab. But my question is more about the long term. So I've heard that once you change the zoning, it can't go back, and so they have these great standards and these great goals that they're going to be really fantastic, which is great, and say they are fantastic the entire time. Then when they sell the facility, who's to say the next manager is not going to make it go out of business, like the detox in your neighborhood went out of business, you said. And then I wanted to pose the question, how do you feel about that detox business in your neighborhood that went out of business? Anyway, those are my concerns.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Go.
Just one more thing.
One thing.
Okay. So again, the Kaysville City Code purpose, 17-12-1, this is the single-family residential district, states the following. The purpose of a single-family residential district is to provide for areas in appropriate locations where quiet, low-density residential neighborhoods may be established, maintained, and protected. The regulations of this district are designed to promote and encourage a suitable environment for families, most of whom will have children. To this end, the regulations permit the establishment of single-family dwellings and also permit, with proper controls, those public and quasi-public activities such as schools, libraries, churches, parks, and playgrounds, which serve the needs of families. The regulations are intended to prohibit the establishment or operation of any activity which would be adverse to such a residential environment. So if this becomes changed, the rest of the residents who's trying to access the park, the residential amenities, will be going through a business district to do so, through a non-family residence district. I feel it will violate that intended prohibition.
Thanks. All right. Okay, it looks like we're done with the public hearing. We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up to us here on the commission. I do want to say one thing real quick, though, with regard to the difference between social detox and medical detox. From my understanding and from my experience with this, which I've been personally affected by this myself, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think social detox is more counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy and things along those lines, whereas medical detox is done strictly through pharmaceuticals. Is that correct?
You have both in medical detox, you have groups and individual counseling.
Okay. But social detox doesn't have anything to do with pharmaceuticals. Okay, right. But so that answers. Okay.
And
All right.
I have a related question, but could you come to the podium, please? Thank you so much. So what would the change be then for you to go from what you're currently doing and what you would like to do? How does that change? You know, why are you here for this reason?
We want another regulatory agency to oversee us. Just kidding, but we become subject to we become subject to the health department as another new regulatory agency overseeing our operations as a medical facility.
So,
and
how does it change your internal operations?
You know, you have 24-hour nursing care. So we'd have at the lowest level of a license, a registered nurse on staff 24 hours a day to monitor the client's vital signs, symptoms of withdrawal, be able to administer medications. We're already Joint Commission accredited, just like Intermountain Healthcare.
But you'll have medicine on the premises, right? I mean, you'll have...
We do have prescriptions there today for the clients that are prescribed medications. But the registered nurse administers that medication.
So then, along with that, I'm trying to piece this together because I had the same question as to why are we here? What is going to be the difference? Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like relatively recently something changed, and now the Department of Health is another agency that you are beholden to, and as part of that, you are required to be in a non-residential zone. Is that
no,
okay?
Not today. No, rehabs across the state of Utah are now applying for a social detox license, and that's through the Department of Human Services, and they're getting them in droves. And they're
because
detoxing.
There's no pharmaceuticals involved.
There are no pharmaceuticals.
And you already do that.
We do not do that.
You do not do the social detox?
No,
they do.
No, that's what we're trying to avoid here. This is why we're coming for a zone change, so that we can get fully licensed as a medical detox and not put people's lives at risk or the community at risk. I mean,
so right now you don't do any detox.
Climbing the walls and wanting to jump your fence. Those are the social detox patients that are terribly uncomfortable and having withdrawal symptoms that are unbelievable. So, two other quick things. The gunshot that happened was self-inflicted and not a patient of ours. It was someone who came looking for a person that was in treatment. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. We paid for the police. You can look at the city's budget. We paid thousands of dollars for a police officer to sit in front of the facility and make sure everybody was safe, because the guy that shot himself got out of jail the next day. The psychiatrist couldn't even admit him to the psych unit. They couldn't pink slip him. The judge let him right out. So we paid that. I don't know, you have to look at the budget. Almost $10,000 for cops to sit in front of our place for a month. So the community felt safe, so our patients felt safe, while that patient was still in treatment. We don't allow smoking. So if someone's smoking, they're not in our program.
So let me ask you a question again about the drugs on the facility.
Sure.
You're saying that you have, obviously, the people there have their own drugs, but you're not, the program is not administering them. Is that the difference?
We supervise self-administration of that medication.
And is that going to change with this
Definitely.
proposal?
That's why we'll have the nurses there.
So the nurses will be administering it?
So currently, do you have any nurse on staff then?
What's that?
Do you have any nurse on staff currently?
We do. We have an advanced practice
and they
register.
don't administer any of the drugs?
They do
at all?
when they're there, but they're not there 24 hours a day. That's not residential treatment. That's not our, it's not required. It's very expensive.
And I'm sorry, I interrupted and shouldn't have, but I was just trying to make sure I understood so you don't have any detox there right now. Is that what you're saying?
People come from hospitals and they come, maybe an alcoholic will come after 24 to 48 hours and they'll be on Librium to help them, or phenobarbital, something to help them not have seizures.
Mm-hmm.
And that medication will be administered while that medication order expires. But no, we don't detox people.
Currently, okay.
Yeah.
How many? Go ahead.
So just related to that, will you walk me through an existing, I don't know if patient is the right term.
Sure.
How does that person come in contact with your facility? They come in. How long are they usually there? What are they doing when they are there? Tell me all the details about what currently is happening, and then after that, I want to know. And we'll get to this. What do you want to have happen that's different?
Sure. So today we have families or patients themselves call looking for help, and our nurse or doctor will assess them to see if they need a medical detox and send them to a hospital. If they're on opiates, if they're just taking Lortabs and Percocets and medications, well, they'll go to the hospital, and more than half the time, their insurance isn't going to cover an opiate-only detox. It's not life-threatening. There is no medical necessity to have you in a hospital. Mm-hmm. So they turn around and say, taper off of this medication and then go to rehab. Most of those people never make it to rehab because they can't get off by themselves. And so we're looking to solve that problem. Someone goes through an ER and gets cleared, their vital signs are good, their blood works fine, they're not in liver failure, any of the critical phases of detox. They can come to a program like ours in this situation and have medications administered. And after probably a week or 10 days, they're normal again, right? A normal day in treatment is up at 7 a.m., taking a walk through the park on a meditation walk, or going over to Gold's Gym. We have memberships to Gold's Gym that they go work out. Then they come back. They have breakfast at 8. Classes start at 9 o'clock. They have psychoeducation groups, all kinds of different counseling groups throughout the day. We have individual counseling. We have a marriage and family therapist on staff. They do process groups. They have lunch at noon, dinner at 5. They go out to a meeting in the community, AA, NA, ARP, all kinds of meetings. They do a reflections group at 9 o'clock. They sit around and talk about their day, highs and lows, and why it sucks to be sober, and I hope life gets better soon, or I might leave this place. To bed at 10 o'clock during the week, back up at 6:30, 7 o'clock. That's a typical day in rehab. Visitation on the weekends, families can come visit.
How long are they usually average?
Minimum of 30 days. So we try to keep them 45, 60 days. It's all based on a person's need. Someone who's very severe may need more time to, get stabilized.
Do they sign a contract?
No. It's all based on medical necessity.
And who decides what's necessary or not?
Doctors and therapists and insurance companies.
And how many people at one time is
We're
a
licensed
max
for 8.
capacity? Okay, 8.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would it change with a zoning change?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
Okay.
Well, the other gentleman, owner, said that you would probably have to go down to 5 with.
Well, so you balance the detox beds with the treatment beds.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 8 beds. You're going to split them between the two populations. So
Oh, I see.
Yeah. We're not looking. Exactly. No, that's 8. We have 8 beds. Yeah. No, we're not in violation of anything.
Okay, so let's get to that, because let's clarify that. What he's basically saying, I believe, is, and he read the code, 5 unrelated people in a home,
Single resident.
in a single family residential, if it's in a single family residential zoning district. They're saying 8 beds plus all the people who are there to administer. So staff, are they in violation or are they not?
And is there a conditional use permit or not?
Yeah, because we've heard both. They say that there's not.
As you noticed, Anne Marie went and grabbed the file.
Yeah.
I've been looking through that as I've listened to the comments. From what I can tell, it was not a conditional use. There are dozens of letters here back and forth from our attorney, also from other attorneys reviewing this item. It was deemed that it was a permitted use in the R1 zone, largely based on the Fair Housing Act that state and federal government dictates, which indicates that
It's a reasonable
people with disabilities need to have reasonable accommodation to live like just anybody else does. And that's why there's been a lot of people say this doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood. Well, whether you agree or not, the Fair Housing Act says it does belong in a residential neighborhood.
So when was that ruling?
This was back when they first opened in 2007, 2008.
The Department of Justice and the Department of Housing and Urban Development have said they cannot violate the current zoning. That is not approved. That is not a reasonable accommodation.
Is that state or federal?
Okay, I think he's getting to that. So are they in violation of the current zoning with 8 beds or not?
From what I've read here, they were permitted to go up to 8 beds. That limitation is shown in what I can find here.
And that's public, so the public could request those papers and find that themselves. Is that correct?
And we could state that that was a misappropriation of the law at the time.
These are mostly letters from the attorney where those things were determined.
So maybe not.
So we'd have to go back and see what's in the public record and what's in the private record and which things are available. The other issue, and again, this is from almost 10 years ago. One of the letters here from the city attorney states that under the definition of disability, disability does not include current illegal use of or addiction to any federal controlled substance as defined in certain codes. So I think the reason that we believe this needs to go through the rezone process to do what they want to do is because we believe it's no longer home for people with disabilities. It goes into whether actual treatment of addicted persons.
But that's not really the issue, whether they are in violation. That's not really.
So we're.
I mean, it's irrelevant, but. So.
Sorry, I mean, the minutes from that meeting in 2009 state, Councilmember Miller.
Can you hold off on that? Let us kind of. We'll come back. We'll come back to you, and it's relevant. But we'd like you to come to the podium so you can be on the record. And we're currently talking with someone else. Thank you.
Any other questions for Tyler?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think I grasp the current situation. A few questions related to that. It sounds like there are drugs being administered. You're saying the ones that are being administered are being supervised, but they are self-administered currently?
Correct.
And if this is rezoned, what will change there, number one? And if there is going to be any change, what additional medication will be brought in? And then I have questions related to that, depending on what you say.
Yeah, so the medications will be administered by nurses that we'll have on staff.
So the same medications?
Same and probably some additional.
Okay, so probably some additional, and maybe this is hypothetical, and I get that, but if it is hypothetical, I'm asking you to go there. What would be those additional ones, and what's different about those additional medications?
Just more acute, I guess, for the withdrawal symptoms that are more acute.
Stronger medication.
Yeah.
So it's not Suboxone. It's other kinds of detox drugs?
So we do not subscribe to the Suboxone maintenance program.
Uh-huh.
There are rehabs all over the state that administer Suboxone in the residential treatment programs. That's not us.
Uh-huh.
People are off of that, or, you know, that's not our model. We're abstinence-based. So medications people take in treatment, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, you know, things for...
And then the additional ones would be drugs that are for medical detox. Is that correct?
Clonidine, you know, different medications that help
So
with blood pressure.
in concert with what they're taking already, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, things along those lines, if, not when, if this is rezoned, then we bring in a contingent of medical detox pharmaceuticals to go in concert with what they're taking. That's my understanding.
Exactly. To keep
And without the rezone, you wouldn't have that additional
right, because there would be
suite
no
of
medical
pharmacology.
detox.
Right. You'd sit in the space of this social detox that I imagine, you know, would be a very uncomfortable space.
Okay.
So the drugs that are currently being administered, the medications that are currently being administered, how are they stored on site? How are they delivered to the site? So I guess let's go with those ones first.
So here in Kaysville, we use the Bowman's Pharmacy because they bubble pack medications for us.
So there's nothing stored on site?
Great relationship with them. Yeah, once they come on site, they're
then you
stored
have-
according to Joint Commission protocol, behind a locked door, behind another locked door, and a medication cabinet that's also locked.
And is that something, I think Mr. Pope mentioned that there are random inspections from the state. Is that something that they inspect when they come?
All of the medication records are inspected.
And have you ever...
Never failed anything.
Never failed, okay.
Never been written up for anything. Never... I mean, I'm telling you, I'm the guy that's up at the state capitol advocating for the patient brokering bill this year.
Yeah.
You know, we're pushing for regulation in our space. This is not...
Yeah.
You know.
So currently what, and I hope the commission bears with me, but I think we need more information, and I'm trying to get more information here, and I appreciate the answers so far. What percent, and I don't know, this may just be a ballpark, maybe your gut reaction, or maybe you have numbers, I don't know. What percent that begin your process go all the way through?
So right now, we have the longest process of anybody. We have a 6-month program. So we ask somebody for that commitment voluntarily from day one. We want them to come to residential treatment after having a detox, if they can find one, do residential treatment, and then stay with us and live in the apartments right by the fire station or up behind the Tasties and live in sober living. That's also a monitored environment. And go to outpatient counseling, day treatment program in the new building we just opened this week over between Flint Street and Sportsplex Drive. The big white barn-looking building is now our outpatient
Oh, that's yours,
office.
yeah.
So we're investing in Kaysville. This is not, we're not leaving. You know, this facility is going to remain a residential treatment program regardless if we get this approval or not, unless Jeremy decides to move it somewhere else, tear it down and build a Wendy's. I mean, this property fronts 200 North. It's part of an overlay zone that it can be rezoned. I mean, it could be Maverick's competitor, you know? So, or like the guys 2 doors down the block that built the dental office. The property just is what it is. It qualifies for this.
Okay, so I don't know what the adjective is. If you if this were rezoned, what changes in your process? I asked you to walk us through the day in a life type question of the existing process. If it gets rezoned, what changes, if anything?
You know, the patients that would be in detox probably wouldn't be participating in as many groups and classes as someone who's in residential treatment. They just don't feel well enough to. It's a waste of their time. It's a waste of a therapist's energy. We would have an additional day or two with a nutritionist, a dietitian, someone who's evaluating their needs. I mean, malnutrition is a huge problem in addiction. You know, all they chase is the drug and fast food. We'd have a lot more medical staff on site. But the number of staff actually decreased probably. I mean, the car volume that we've had in the past is really because at Kaysville House, well, we used to be in the building behind Maverick with Crossroads of the West. We had half of that building. But a lot of the meetings and things happened between the two buildings, so they'd park and walk across the street. Now that we have the new office, you know, traffic's going to be greatly reduced just by having that bigger space.
So related to that, will you talk about parking? There was a concern, and I think we could probably all answer this question in terms of the whole property could be repaved. I'm here to tell you, if this gets rezoned and there's a development agreement attached to it, which is what the HC zone virtually requires, is my understanding, I would not be comfortable with a development agreement that says, yeah, pave the whole place. So I don't know, that's not a pressing concern in terms of paving the whole place, but parking is a concern. So will you address parking and traffic and those concerns?
Yeah. We wouldn't intend to change the structure of the building. We want it to continue to look like a residential home. That's going to be the uniqueness of detox in this environment. You're not walking into a hospital. You know, people are very comfortable setting with, you know, a home environment, not a hospital environment. The parking is sufficient for the needs that we see. You know, we have a spot up the side of the house that we rarely even use. And then there's the 4 across the front, and then the circle. We'd love to put up a gate and keep everyone from doing the U-turn on the driveway. I mean, that's the biggest problem. People come down 200, oh, made a wrong turn. We're the U-turn. So we have to try to park vehicles so that they can't make that U-turn. You know, Maverick's been a great contributor to traffic. All the semis that park right in front of the place so drivers can get out and jaywalk across the street to grab their drink. I don't think parking's, you know, going to be. We're not contributing to the traffic and parking problem like other things in the area.
So, and I realize you're probably not the expert at this, someone from the state would be, but in your understanding, your experience, well, first of all, let me ask, you are licensed in some way by the state?
Have been since day one.
Okay. What is, just generally speaking, what were the requirements for that license? What do you have to do to maintain the license? And I assume these inspections are related to that, so what are they inspecting beyond what you've already said?
So licensing takes months and months to get through. You have to have a policy and procedure manual, qualified staff, and you have to show them that you can do what you say you're going to do. We're licensed by the Utah Department of Human Services. We're licensed. Our food service is supervised by the Davis County Health Department. We have the business license from, you know, Kaysville City. So we have those 3 regulatory agencies now, as well as a self-imposed accreditation body, the Joint Commission, that accredits hospitals. So they come in and crawl through all of your policies and procedures to make sure you're doing things beyond any level of.
Have you, in any of those regulatory agencies that oversee you, the voluntary ones or the mandatory ones, have you ever had or been subjected to any type of disciplinary action?
The health department found some raw meat on the second shelf one time. You know, things. No, we've never had any.
Did the raw meat, let's just say, did that rise to the level of like a citation or anything of that nature?
Just a notation on the renewal that we had to educate the chef that they couldn't store that there.
So it was like a food handlers type thing.
So our chefs are all Serve Safe certified. Beyond food handlers permit even 1 level. So.
Okay.
But yeah.
There's a comment, several comments actually, related to the perceived unavailability of your facility for comments, concerns, questions, dialogue, anything of that nature. Are you aware that people were trying to contact you, and if so, why was there not any dialogue?
I was not. So we've had a few occasions when neighbors have come over. We had a drum circle in the backyard one time. We do a drumming class, and we took it outside, and the neighbor came over and said, it's disruptive. I was made aware of the dog barking incident, but a few neighbors around have dogs too that bark. I have a neighbor in Farmington that has a dog. But no, I was not aware that people were coming over or calling. I have my cell phone on my business card. You know, everybody can have one. I got a call this morning from one of the neighbors. So I don't know how he got my cell phone number, from the city or someone, but I've never avoided having a conversation, you know, with people that have come over.
Is your cell phone the business line? There's another business line
Yeah.
for the facility.
Yep.
So, I'm sorry, but I just want these questions answered. So, and maybe this isn't a question for you, but I want more information about this. Sounds like it was someone attempted to take their life. Unfortunately, I mean, what happened with the shooting beyond what was already said? Is the city? Was there any potential crime that came out of that? Was there police called out to that, ambulance, fire? I want to know more information about that.
Yeah. Yeah, police, fire, everybody is called out. We called 911.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was someone who was not there.
It was a family member of someone who was in treatment and was upset that their loved one was getting clean and sober, afraid of losing that relationship. The guy had been in and out of the state hospital. You can read about him. He's now dead. He successfully committed suicide. But he came on site and shot himself in the chest with a .22 caliber gun. Was hauled off in an ambulance, and that was it. And then we paid for a month's worth of surveillance. We could have hired the rent-a-cop and, you know, saved us some money, but we wanted Kaysville PD there.
So that's extremely unfortunate, and it's sad that those things happen and will continue to happen, unfortunately. But is there anything that he's missed? Is that inaccurate? I guess, and Stro, if that is inaccurate, please somebody say that was not accurate, because I just want to make sure that that's what in fact was the case, because it paints a different picture than I initially assumed, because I had never heard of that.
I'll maybe answer a little bit to that. When in part of our staff reviews, I reached out to Chief Oberg with the police department in consideration of this, as is typical with many of the applications that he looked at, and without a great amount of detail, he said the only instance that he was aware of great of substance was that particular situation of someone external to the facility came. There was the shooting that occurred, and that he felt that it was a pretty positive reaction from the existing management of the facility, that they reached out to the police and did out of their pocket and have them come and monitor the facility afterwards. So that's probably about as lengthy as I've received.
Have you changed your protocol at all how do you keep weapons out of the home? Do you have a sign that says no weapons, even if even they're a concealed weapon permit holder? I mean, how do you, because if somebody were to come in and, transfer a gun,
Yeah.
how do you control that or monitor that?
It's part of our visitor sign-in form. I mean, it says they can't have their cell phone with their people. They check all their personal belongings when they come. So
Visitors too.
yeah, visitors, definitely. Visitors are subject to drug testing. So someone shows up and they look a little drunk, we'll breathalyze them. They look high, let's take a UA. And visitors come knowing those things. And honestly, 9 years and hundreds of people have come through our program, and we've had one incident of somebody who was clearly psychotic, not related to the facility, coming to do self-harm. And there's been plenty of self-harm incidents all over Kaysville.
Yeah.
Successful suicides. Utah's top of the list in suicides.
So this might be a question answered by both staff and Mr. Dallas. So let me just see if I understood you or heard you correctly. The police chief, who's no longer the police chief because he retired, right?
Police Chief Oberg is
still
on staff.
The former one.
The former police chief
Lee
reviewed this with the staff, and the question was, hey, do we have any concerns about crime here? And the only thing he said was a non-crime, but a gun was discharged.
Yeah, when we get applications of any variety, we try to let departments within the city look at it for any number of reasons that they may or may not have comments or concerns. And so when it was reached out to the police department, he did mention that specific incident, but
nothing else.
That was the only comment that was received,
So,
as was stated.
So nothing about drug use, nothing about needles around or on the property, burglaries, assaults, thefts, overdoses, and medical calls, nothing, except for that one.
Yeah, that was the only comment that was made to me.
Okay.
Have there been other occasions where police have been dispatched?
Not police, but we have had one other transport on a seizure. Someone had a seizure disorder, and police transported to Davis Hospital. So.
And so Chief Olberg may not even have been aware of that necessarily if it was purely medical.
Yeah, correct. If our fire response or emergency, that would have been through the different departments. So, and we do have a new fire chief on staff. So again, as they were reached out to, their comments included a change of occupancy, building construction type issues that we would just need to be aware of with a potential change in the use of the facility. But I don't know that he would have the background if there were other concerns to even bring that up as a past incident or procedure.
So I'm a little confused also from the information so far. So someone indicated that you don't even really need the health care zoning, but it sounds like you really do need the health care zoning to do this.
We want the healthcare zoning so that we can do medical detox. We could, just like all of the other rehabs out there that are going the cheap and easy way, file for a social detox license with the Department of Human Services and start offering that unregulated, uncontrolled, in my mind, unsafe service. Until 2 years ago, there was one social detox in Utah. It's Volunteers of America down in Salt Lake. They have cots on the floor. You go in and dry out. You throw up. You go to the bathroom. But now it's rehab's a way to get around doing it the, honestly, the best way. And that's what we're trying to do.
But there are facilities that have offered detox for years, right? And
there are.
Yeah. Thank you.
So both you and Mr. Pope have indicated that, you don't need the zone change to be able to do the social detox. And at least the way I pretty much interpreted it from Mr. Pope was, it's kind of like, hey, we don't need to be here if, we can do this anyway under social. And I don't know if I took that as, well, the way I did take it was that, if you guys deny us, we're going to do it anyway. We'll just do social detox. But then you're saying that that's not the way to go. That's not the thing to do.
It's a liability that we don't want to take on.
If you are denied, are you going to move forward with social detox as part of your program?
We would probably have to get that license just to be safe in a space where it's really fuzzy. So if someone goes to a hospital and the doctor at the hospital writes them a Suboxone prescription to go home and self-detox, well, the family finds that they can't do that, so bring them to a treatment center. We need that social detox license so that we can oversee a detox. It's not supervised medically. It's not what we want to do. But we're in a life and death business. If people don't get treatment, they die. Overdose is what's the opioid epidemic. That's what's killing more people in Utah than almost anything else. So we're just trying to...
So it is part of your business plan if you're unable to get a medical...
We've talked about it, but we don't think that's necessary. We think that this is something that can happen.
And then a couple other questions. A lot of the residents talked about the risk. What is the risk, and what measures and protocol do you have? Because you cannot guarantee that even under your current circumstance, you can't guarantee that somebody's going to walk away.
No.
So what is the risk, and what protocol do you have, and how do you go about if somebody in medical detox does manage to get out? what do
So
you
people
do?
in our program don't get out and sneak out. We're a voluntary admission program.
So
we don't,
even
we
the
don't take
detox
court ordered.
would be a voluntary
Definitely,
program.
yeah, definitely voluntary. And the one or two people that they may have seen dragging suitcases over the freeway and different things, those are the ones that didn't want help transportation any other way. I'm just going to go. Give me my phone. Now they go across the street to the Maverick and buy a pack of smokes or a coffee or whatever, because we restrict a lot of substances in our program that most people don't, like caffeine. So, yeah, to answer your question, yeah.
So how I mean, if somebody does happen to get out and
They just notify staff.
I haven't experienced it, so I'm maybe a little bit naive with it. But when somebody's going through detox, I mean, what are the symptoms? What are the risk or the dangers because if it's like I think that it's a tough thing.
It is, yeah.
And they aren't in a rational mind. They're like somebody said, good people that when they're on drugs they do bad things. So what protocol and procedures do you have in place with somebody not in the rational mind that's going through that experience and doing bad things, gets out and poses a threat to the neighbors? How do you deal with that?
So we don't have procedures written and in place today. We don't have a license. We have to go through. So if this zoning change
how
were to
would you
happen,
treat it? How would you do it then? Because
It's
that's a question that's
it's
been
all
asked.
according to policies and procedures that are dictated by the Joint Commission and other regulatory bodies. I mean, the Department of Human Services now, anytime there's an incident that someone has to be transported to a higher level of care, those are all reportable incidents. We have to file a report with the Department of Human Services. They have all the records.
So if you get this and somebody does happen to get out, you just let them go. You don't notify neighbors. You don't call the police. You just.
So, yeah, I guess if.
Can I ask a question about that? You keep using the phrase "get out."
Yeah.
Is this under lockdown? You talked about they walk across the street to go to the park. They go to Gold's Gym. There's no get out. This isn't a prison, so they're not escaping. If they want to get out,
they're free to come and go.
Walk out
just
the door.
like in your hospital down the street, you're not locked in.
Okay,
I
just wanted to clear that up because it sounded like from what you were saying that they are under lockdown, and if
if somebody's in there and they're going through detox and they're not in rational mind, and if they truly pose a danger to themselves or others and they leave, where are they going?
If they pose a danger to themselves or others, that's a whole different classification. That's psychiatric care. That's a psych unit hospital. Davis Hospital is our closest psych unit.
Yeah, but you can't guarantee though.
I don't feel I'm getting an answer.
I don't feel though that you can guarantee. You can't guarantee though that from what I've understood here from all this, you can't sit there in good faith and tell us that your clients don't pose a flight risk, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So it's possible. I mean, that's what we're getting at here?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I guess what
where do they go?
I guess that's what we're asking. That is 200 North is 200 North is the busiest street in Kaysville and for miles around. I mean, is that going to cause accidents? They're going to walk out into the street. I mean, and we've talked a lot of hypotheticals here with the audience and with you and even with us here because there's a lot of ambiguity with this and with what's in front of us. So we're trying to get answers. This is all being faced with, like Commissioner Bullock stated, there's a lot of ambiguity here. And I mean, I feel that something that's as important as this, the opioid epidemic, cleaning up detox, recovering alcoholics, things along those lines, all this stuff. We need concrete answers out of you as to how you plan on forging forward if this is given.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that then? There's two concerns here related to that, I think, and I think partially why we haven't heard an answer is there is a question about what could happen in the future. We don't know that. We have to weigh the risks.
You have to have a plan, though. You have to if you're going to do this, you have to know how you're going to deal with those situations.
Yes. So we have to say, okay, we as a body have to say, what are the risks of this happening? Number one, and number two. in light of those risks, what are they going to do to mitigate those risks? But then we can also say, what's happened in the past 9 years? So, have you had someone who's in the past 9 years, someone who's in the middle of detox,
They don't have detox.
Detox is a whole different thing.
Someone in the middle of treatment, in a manic state or some state that we as a society are afraid of. Have you ever had someone leave the front door and do something criminally or not that you became aware of?
No, we have had people leave the program, sure. No,
Okay.
Not that you're aware of any
No.
criminal activity after they just
Not
take
at
off.
all.
In the immediate, not we're talking,
Yeah.
they could go a year later and do something, but yeah. So,
and to your point of like, what are we going to do? Well, those policies and procedures they be written. I mean, this is why we hire medical doctors and nurses, the ones that run the program.
So right now you don't know what you do.
So I would say whatever the protocol says we do, and that's dictated by the health department, the Department of Human Services, the Joint Commission, and all these regulatory bodies that oversee detoxes all over the country.
Okay, but you don't know what those regulations and policies are.
No, I don't.
Yeah, because you keep referring to that, but if you're going to be doing this, you should know.
Whether they have to move to lockdown.
I didn't know what I was doing 10 years ago either when I got into the treatment business. And that's what you learn. That's what you learn when you write all these.
He won't get a license until he does this. So he can't operate this way until he gets a license.
I understand that, but if you're going to get a license, if you got to have a business plan, you got to have something together. If you're doing this, you got to know what those are. If you got regulations and regulatory agencies that are writing these things, I would think that you would know, because it's a question and concern that the residents have had, and I think that they do deserve an answer to that. I mean, you've been pretty candid with some of the others, but this one you're kind of skirting around it. And maybe I'm overreacting with it, but I think it's. I'm just not getting a comfort level that.
Well, I think when we're asking, what are you going to do in the absolute worst case scenario?
Yeah. It's like they're saying they have to assume.
I think that at some point we'd like an answer to that. Worst case scenario happens, we have one of your patients take someone hostage. They've
Well, not even
threatened
that.
to blow up the
They
neighborhood.
go into a neighbor's
let's go
yard,
worst
they
case.
come home and somebody's
What
in
is
there.
the procedure? But it sounds like from what he's been saying, we have some procedures in place. We strip these folks down when they come in. They don't have their phone. They don't have their smokes. They don't have their drugs. I'm assuming you don't allow
Done.
sex offenders into your program.
No sex offenders.
And
no-
so, I mean, I heard repeatedly tonight, I have 7 children, I have 9 children, there's 24 children in the cul-de-sac. This is our concern. We have kids here. How are these patients affecting our children in our neighborhood? And it sounds like some preemptive steps are being taken. Now, granted, they can come and go as they please, but that can happen at my house. I can't guarantee that the kids that walk past my house every day to go to the school aren't going to do things. My neighbor, about 4 doors down, her son's car was stolen from her driveway in the morning. Well, how are you going to control that? Well, I don't know. There's a car thief in the neighborhood, apparently. I don't have an answer to everything. I would like to have some answers for worst case, what happens if one of your patients just goes crazy and you're in the neighborhood? Would you notify the neighbors? I don't know. Call the police.
I've tried
I'm
to be
sure we would
quiet
call
here
the
for
police.
All right, Commissioner understands a few things that he'd like to add.
I feel like I think we're being a little unfair on this line of questioning. I think what we're struggling with here is whether this is appropriate in the neighborhood, which is one of the right questions we have to ask. And I don't think you can require somebody to have a plan for when people walk out the door, because people walk out the door of every door. The question is whether the type of people that this new level of treatment is going to bring into the neighborhood is appropriate for the neighborhood. That to me seems like the question, and I don't think it's fair to say, tell me what you're going to do in a certain circumstance when you're not at that level yet, and we can't control what happens with people that come and go. But the question to me, and I think this is the core question, is whether the type of treatment that's going to occur here is appropriate for a residential neighborhood. And I think that's where we need to focus.
So we're trying to find out
agree.
what makes it different, and so my related to that is if you take on the level of medical detox, then does it become a lockdown facility?
No.
It's voluntary.
No. In Utah,
It's still voluntary.
In Utah, only psychiatric facilities can hold people against their will.
Okay.
The hospital down the block, they can't hold you either.
Okay, thank you.
So, can I ask a question about zoning?
Sure.
What was the zone before it was changed to R1? Isn't that, I heard earlier that it was something else and then it was changed to R1?
No, the home was built.
It was a model home, wasn't it?
In a
It was a model
R120
home.
zone. It was used as a private residence for several years. As time went by, it became available. These people acquired it and began their
And the current
facility
use
at that
is
time.
allowed under in R1 zone because of the ADA and FHA.
Essentially, yes.
Right, which usurps city code or city ordinance.
We'll have to invite someone back up again.
The current use is, but not the current method.
Well,
that's the staff's determination.
That's debatable too, but so.
And the type of people that are coming are the same ones that you're seeing walk through the park and go to your church meetings and everything else. We're
Right.
not bringing in different people. We're just bringing people in that need some medical stabilization better than they've gotten down the street because their insurance won't cover, Intermountain Healthcare Services or whatever. So it's the same population. It's not a different group.
Okay,
Well,
that's a great question, actually, that I had thank you that you reminded me. Whatever we decide here, and this is a staff question, if it got rezoned, how does that change, how does that affect the property if and when this were sold in the future? So, first part of the question. And then second part, if it got rezoned, I think we would have a development agreement. Does a development agreement bind future purchasers? So does it run with the land, I guess?
First of all, any property can be requested for rezone at any time.
Right. Okay.
So this rezone could be approved 5 years from now or whenever. Somebody could come in and request a rezone to a different zone. That's the case on any property anywhere. That's not unique. In the healthcare zone, as you mentioned early on, it highly recommends in most cases that a development agreement be associated with the healthcare rezone. That's for two reasons. One, to address many of the issues that have been discussed tonight, make sure that things are done appropriately. And secondly, to address the Fair Housing Act and make sure that the city is doing what it needs to on that side. So if you read the ordinance, it says that should be done in a negotiated manner. And then the rezone would be subject to that development agreement. The development agreement runs with the property. In this case, it would be a recorded document. Typically, it does pass to successors and assigns, but all the requirements of that development agreement also pass on to a future owner. So the intent of that is to get a clear definition of what's going on in the facility, what the restrictions are, what the requirements are, and those are set in that agreement. And generically, it states in the ordinance, not generically, actually, that if they become out of compliance with the provisions of that development agreement, that the rezone can be, the zoning can be rescinded, and then they're not allowed to be there anymore.
And that is the current users, if it were rezoned, or anybody who buys from them, they start doing something that violates or that is different than the development agreement, they are then in violation of the development agreement, and the zone is rescinded, and they're in violation of the zone that it goes back to.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay.
But does that cover the type of, he's very clear on who they allow into that facility. They have to be this
Could you come to the microphone, please? Can you come to the microphone, please? Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that I think the fear is that that's good today, and I live there too, and I have to admit that the problems have been small because they really have tried. But we're comfortable with what they have now. We're not comfortable with what they might bring in, and there's no assurance that you might change your clientele in the future, or someone you sell it to might change their clientele. So that's the concern too. I mean, if all of the people that lived there in the past, we were assured that they would be those type of people in the future, well, things are probably okay. We've lived with it for 9 years. But why are we changing anything? If it works fine and we're all comfortable in the neighborhood with it, why are we bringing more risk that we perceive into our neighborhood? That's my point. And there's no guarantee somebody won't change that in the future. And another point, too, I wanted to make is, maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed like with the conditional use permit, it was still zoned as residential. So if they did something wrong, it didn't change the zoning. It was still a residential property. And we felt like we had some control in the neighborhood because it was still a residential property. And if they didn't perform correctly, that residential or that conditional use permit could be pulled. But once it gets rezoned, we feel like we have less control now to monitor what's going on there because it's no longer a conditional use permit. Now maybe
and we've learned now that there's not even a conditional use permit. It's a
so it's a permitted use,
which means permitted use,
which
will tell you clearly how confused everyone was 9 years ago, because there was no brochure sent out. This is how we can legally do it, and I know I've taken a lot of time, but I also want to say I'm offended when the one gentleman stated, well, we could just assume all of the neighbors are drug users. We are not drug users. That is a lovely neighborhood with law-abiding citizens.
We don't need to get off in the weeds on that and speculate what neighbors
well, he was speculating when he stated
I
that.
get that, ma'am, but that's fine.
He said that he's not going to do that.
He's not going to do that. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. All right. So where we need to stand here on this is where exactly. I mean, we've taken 2 hours now on this. Where exactly are we as a commission? Where are we at? What do we think?
I am.
Do we need to talk to anybody else? Do we need to? I mean, I think the public hearing's
the gentleman
closed.
in the front has had several points. I think
Yeah.
give him 3 minutes
clarify.
if you'd like.
Sure.
To restate.
Jason, if you want to come up
go
here,
ahead.
that's fine.
So, thank you. Again, Jason Largey. So, I guess to boil it down, my understanding of the current use, if someone then decides to use illegal substances, they're kicked out. They don't get to stay. Because they can't do that under the current rules, which is what's protected by the ADA, the Fair Housing Act. I really need to read, so I'm not going to take the time that I have to read the minutes. The minutes said that they were going to limit to 5. That's what the minutes said in 2009 of your minutes. It would have 5 residents. Applied for a business facility, he would be able to have 8 residents when he renewed his license, but he'd have to abide by the new ordinance and could only have 5 residents. So the Department of Justice on August 6, 2015, there was a Q&A. What kinds of local zoning and land use laws are related to group homes violate the Fair Housing Act? Local zoning and land use laws that treat groups of unrelated individuals with disabilities less favorably than similar groups of unrelated persons without disabilities violate the Fair Housing Act. For example, suppose a city zoning ordinance defines a family to include up to 6 unrelated persons living together as a household and gives such a group of unrelated persons the right to live in any zoning district without special permission. If that ordinance also disallows a group home for 6 or fewer people with disabilities in a certain district or requires this home to seek a use permit, such requirements would conflict with the Fair Housing Act. The ordinance treats persons with disabilities worse than those without disabilities. A local government may generally restrict the ability of groups of unrelated persons to live together as long as the restrictions are imposed on all such groups. Thus, in the case where a family is defined to include up to 6 unrelated people, an ordinance would not, on its face, violate the act if a group home for 7 people with disabilities was not allowed to locate in a single-family zoned neighborhood.
So is your point towards whether there's a violation of the current use, or is this towards the zone? Because we're talking about a rezone tonight.
I know, but I think it's very important to the rezone. They are currently not abiding by the current zone.
The ADA though, the ADA and the FHA, we've discussed this already. From my understanding, or from the understanding of the commission, the ADA and the FHA usurp city code.
The Department of Justice in 2015 said they do not.
Well, that's
exactly right. Says, as discussed below, because persons with disabilities are also entitled to request reasonable accommodations in rules and policies, the group home for 7 persons with disabilities would have to be given the opportunity to seek an exception or waiver. If the criteria for reasonable accommodation are met, the permit would have to be given in that instance, but the ordinance would not be invalid.
Okay.
So it doesn't exempt them from ordinances. It doesn't trump. And there's lots of things about that from the Department of Justice and the Department.
This is a complicated enough issue on the existing status. Our current council is out of town, so it's not something we've been able to reach out to directly regarding that. But I have reached out to many individuals with different organizations, attorneys and so forth, that deal specifically with these situations. And of course, they're limited in what they're willing to share until I start paying them money. But that which I do have is it's very complicated, and I'd be hesitant to dive too deep in the weeds on the existing, whether or not that's appropriate, but to focus on the request. And if there are reasons to go back after the existing, then we'd certainly be willing to do that with our legal counsel at our side.
But you said something also about that ADA does not include the drug.
No, it does not cover anyone currently taking illegal drugs. So,
but it does cover alcoholism and substance addiction, is my understanding, and it's not under the definition of disability, and actually the ADA uses handicap. It's not even, doesn't even term it disability. And so it's under, I think it's under the reasonable accommodation aspect of it. I'm not 100% positive on this, but alcoholism, the word alcoholism is in the federal statute, and I think, I'm not positive on this part, I think substance abuse or something along those lines is in there as well. So those things are covered under the Fair Housing Act and under the ADA, is my understanding.
So current use of illegal medications is not covered.
Current use, right.
Correct.
So
they don't qualify for a disability.
And no one's currently using in this facility, nor the currently or the future.
Well, that's the question with going to detox and adding detox to what is covered.
So then I would like to hear from Mr. Dallas when you're done. If it goes to detox, the medical detox, will there be any risk, and if so, what is the risk that somebody will be a current user of illegal substances?
Well, so it's a two-part, because if they go to the social detox, are they still covered under the ADA and the FHA? I don't care if there's 100,000 other places in Utah. Are they in residential zoned districts? And it's the residential zoning aspect.
Well, but you're asking a question to, we're not a legal body.
I know.
Right. So again, we're getting off in the weeds here where, I mean, yes, there are lawyers here. They don't have their lawyer hat on right now, though.
Nor am I an expert in this, and I'm guessing Matt isn't either. Even if he was, he wouldn't say.
Right. So
again, I'm not trying to say that they can't have the type of facility that they have. It's covered. It's legal. Anything, all the ancillary things that go with it, I believe that they're a very well-run facility of that type. And I'm not saying that they need to leave the neighborhood.
Okay. All right.
I'm saying that it needs to be run in the way that's appropriate.
So we have, I think we have a couple more questions then from Mr. Dallas, and then I think we might be able to wrap out a motion here. So, Lorraine, did you have a question?
Go ahead. You came up for something, right?
He was asking about current use, and no, that's the whole reason we're coming to detox, is because we're not currently using. We haven't had any incident of use in our facility. When they come in, you're correct in assuming they're essentially strip searched, and it's not comfortable. We drug test several times a week.
Are they removed from the program if they fail a drug test?
Exactly.
They removed from the facility.
They don't qualify if they're using drugs in that level of care.
There's no more public comment on this. Go ahead, please.
So they're removed from the program, removed from the facility. They're done.
Yep.
One question I have is we have 8 beds. Are they always full? What is your average? I mean, do you have any kind of average numbers of occupants there in the house? I'm guessing it's not always 8.
No, it's rarely 8. 6, 7 maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
We get to 8 and it's a pretty busy place.
But it sounds like originally there was a limit of 5.
There's never been a limit of 5.
Legal?
How is that limited?
Is that limit legal?
Well, we have the R1, the definition that allows for 5 unrelated,
Unrelated.
right?
Well, but
In our definition of family or single family residence, it says people related by blood or marriage or up to 5 unrelated people. So I skimmed through the documentation here. There was a lot of discussion on what the limit of people would be, whether it would be the 5 or the 8. From what I can see, that it landed on the 8.
And
I'm not
how
gonna
did that
promise
land?
that.
But the relevance here is that if it changes, then we don't have that 5 limitation anymore.
That's correct. Then it goes
That's
to the,
not even at play.
to the
well,
state regulation.
if the
which
5
to
was
be
even
8.
in play to begin with.
Well, it is in play. It's just whether it got somehow there was some exception.
Right, and so was that how was that exception? Where was that in the city council that made that decision?
Why is that relevant? That's the question.
Not for us, to be honest with you.
Then let's.
But for a lot of people out here,
spend any
and
more time on it.
okay,
I can't answer that
Okay.
based on the knowledge I have right now.
Okay.
Part of it had to do with the International Building Code at the time. It was approved for 5, and then Mike, our building official, he had them install
Fire sprinklers.
and other things, bring it up to code, and
Allowed 8.
was granted occupancy for 8. Oh.
Okay.
So that doesn't
All right.
change the zone requirement.
No.
That's a little bit.
All right. More questions?
Just so the split, if I remember or understood right, it would be like a 5-3. What would it be with the detox? 3 detox, 5 in the other program, or would you fluctuate that?
Exactly, yeah. It could go back and forth depending on demand. Yeah.
Somebody, are we somebody ready to recommend?
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for your patience.
I just, sometimes we like to share what we're thinking at this point before we make the recommendation. So I will share what I'm thinking, and that is, I think it's just like a lot of the neighbors have said, a facility that's trying to do it really well, and that was nice to hear Elizabeth say that she's seen few problems. So that was great. For me, anytime there's a rezone request, I feel like it's a really big deal, And I am not in favor of the rezone request. Not because I'm so much concerned about, I'm pretty familiar because my husband is an MD and he does do treatment for people trying to get off their addictions. And, they go in and out. I'm familiar with the challenge, familiar with treatments. I'm a little familiar with detox as well. So I don't have a lot of scare that way, but I just feel like it's not, I'm just not really excited about turning that one spot into a healthcare zone. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And especially knowing that there's some other properties, and I would just wonder whether there could be a different spot for the medical detox and among the properties that you have.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thanks, Lauren. Okay. I can't make a motion, so.
Well, we decided you could.
Well, yeah, but we'll defer to.
I'm not going to make a motion, but I will say, coincidentally or not, I was on the planning commission when this was approved before. I sat in a meeting with neighbors at the behest of Mayor Roundy, and I heard many, perhaps the exact same comments 9 years ago that were stated today. I acknowledge that the concerns are important and that there are risks moving forward, but I have not been convinced that there is going to be a significant change in the use that would affect a zoning analysis. And some of the things that weigh in my mind in favor of a rezone is, in my opinion, this is not, can I see that pointer? This is a residential looking home, but it is not, in my opinion, in the middle of a neighborhood. If this home was before us under the exact same request, I think the answer would be unanimously no. Or any of these other homes back in this neighborhood or any other middle of a residential neighborhood. This one is on one of, aside from I-15 and maybe Highway 89, probably the busiest street in Kaysville. This is on there. So it's not it is not as easy of a question as if it were down in here. And so it's on a main street. Our general plan says if we are going to be looking at fostering business in terms of rezones, that we would put them on main roads, major streets, I think is the word. If there's a major street in Kaysville, this is it. Again, I haven't heard anything that has said to me, and I would invite the commission to tell me otherwise, what, like character-wise of this home is going to change if this goes to healthcare. It's going to look the same. There's going to be the same amount of traffic or parking, is what I've heard. Generally speaking, the same type of people are going to come there. People who are looking to improve their lives and get over something that they're struggling with, which I think across the board we agree is a good thing, but where it happens is where we differ. So it's not going to change the character of the current use. It's just some of the minor things that go on within the four walls of that home are going to change. Now, some of those things are going to be significant in somebody's opinion. In my opinion, not as significant, but that from a impact on the existing neighborhood, aside from the people, which is, I think, a different question, is not going to change the character of this current use. And I just have to say that I had the same concern 9 years ago. I'm concerned about the fears that they're unreasonable, and not that they aren't real fears, and we're worried about the health and safety of our family and our children and our neighborhoods. Those are important considerations, but we've had 9 years to prove what the impact of this use has, and in my opinion, it's not as significant as it is made out to be by the neighbors. And I now realize I'm probably in the minority here, and I'm going out on a limb, but that's where I'm at, and I think that this is a significant need in our society, and I personally think it's a little ironic that that everyone says that these individuals are in it for money, yet they are the ones on the front lines trying to change people's lives. So that, to me, it doesn't have anything to do with rezoning, but that was just, it's a little unsettling to me. It's a little unsettling to me that we can't realize, again, this has nothing to do with rezone, and I guess indulge me for saying this. It's unsettling to me that we paint them with such a broad brush when, yes, they're in it for a business. They could have been doing anything else to make money. There's lots of ways to make money, but here they are trying to help people who are at the bottom of their lives, and they're trying to improve them. I'm not saying that...
Ma'am. Thank you.
And I understand. I get it. I have children too, and we want to keep our families safe and our children safe, and those things are important. We also want to help our family and friends get better, and these individuals are fighting that fight. And so it just was unsettling to me when we just assume that they are only in it for money and they don't care about the people that they're helping. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I would say
go ahead.
I would be in favor of recommending to the city council, who makes the ultimate decision, a rezone.
Yeah, I appreciate those last 2 points you made. One, I do think it's unfair to say they're in it for the money, because that's it doesn't mean that they're not also doing a good thing or trying to do a good thing, right? It's not mutually exclusive. Secondly, I think is a good point that we need to remind everyone that we make a recommendation to the city council. This is a legislative change, and the people that you voted in to be in the city council will make that decision. Where I would differ a little bit from what Josh said is I do think there's a heightened impact here with this change. I think I can gather that from the very need for this change. Otherwise, they would continue doing it. I'm not sure that it's a drastic impact with this shift from what they're doing now to medical detox, but I do think it is a drastic shift from R1 to healthcare. And I think we have a difficult situation here because we have a building that looks like a house. It's been well maintained, maybe better maintained than it used to be, and so maybe this current use has not changed the feel of the neighborhood or changed it very much. And maybe the request for the rezone to facilitate this new type of treatment won't change the neighborhood very much. But I do think a healthcare zone does change the nature of the neighborhood, and I am troubled because I do see it on the edge of, across the street. I wouldn't think there would be any problem at all. So I think there is some creepage here that we need to recognize because it isn't the core or the center of the residential neighborhood. But I think we need to focus on, unless we make a very tight development agreement that requires it to look like a home or requires it to maintain whatever we like about the way it is being run now, I think we have to assume that a healthcare zone will change the neighborhood.
And the other thing with both of those is that staff clarified that new owners could rezone. Everyone has an opportunity to rezone when they, to ask for that if they own a property. But once it is made healthcare, and if someone else in the future buys it in that zone, anything that's appropriate under that zone could go there.
Well, no, that's not what I heard, because there will be a development agreement, and any future purchasers will be beholden to the conditions of the development agreement. And if they violate the conditions of the development agreement, then the rezone is rescinded and goes back to R120.
It could be rescinded, but right, we have to make the development agreement tight enough that it
for any HC, any healthcare, not just this sort of a healthcare facility.
It would be specific to each one.
Yeah.
So it would be specific to this one.
That's correct.
So if another business came in that was this sort of a business, then it would be then we would have a development agreement with the rules.
Specific to that
but some
properties.
The process is that with the healthcare zone and trying to accommodate the Fair Housing Act and make those reasonable accommodations, we have to allow certain facilities in town. We have some discretion, but we don't have as much discretion as maybe we do on a general commercial zone. So the way we offset that is by requiring an individual development agreement with each healthcare rezone that we consider. When we rezoned the property on South Main just recently to the healthcare zone for an assisted living center, that came with a specific development agreement for that property. So this would do the same thing. It would stay with the property until it was rescinded by city council in a similar action. So my recommendation to you tonight would be in order to help answer many of the questions that have been asked, and I think the applicants have got a good sense of what the real concerns are. I would suggest to you that you consider tabling this item, have the applicants get with staff and put together that development agreement that would go with it, and see if that can answer many of the questions, and then consider whether that's adequate to alleviate the concerns with the proposal.
And if we tabled the item, would we have to reopen it to public hearing?
Not necessarily.
No.
You've conducted a public hearing tonight.
Okay.
You may choose to, but you're not required.
And our city council, one of the members of the city council is here. And in times past when we've had this suggestion, he said,
Make a decision.
You've done what you're supposed to do. Make a recommendation and forward it to the city council. Do you feel differently tonight? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just liked it when you said it last time. So.
Well, I actually believe, like what Andy's saying. There's just a lot of unanswered questions here, and I think it would be good to probably have that discussion with the administration and have that brought before, because I think it would be very difficult for the council to make a decision on this with just what we talked about tonight. Just like you're having a hard time making a decision on this as well. There's just a lot of factors.
Yeah, I'd agree, because if I were to vote, at least right now, I would vote against it, not because of some of the things that have been said, because I don't think the HC is an appropriate use for it. But on the other hand, we talk about, business development along the major corridors, which this is. But right now, I just don't feel comfortable and don't feel that we have enough answers to at least me personally, to vote on a rezone to an HC from where it's at right now.
I can echo Commissioner Bullock's comments on that too. I mean, I think at this point, if I were to vote, I would vote against it, based on, some things we've heard here. Obviously, there's been a lot of public clamor here this evening too. But there's still, and I think I said this earlier too, there's a lot of ambiguity here. Yes, there's a lot of fear here from the residents and that, and I understand that. I understand it. I have children. I would have questions too if I had this move into my backyard. I get it. I understand that. I think it's fair and reasonable to allow the applicant to construct a business a development plan, and to bring it before city staff, ultimately bring it before us again here, and move forward from there. So, Tom, do you have anything left to add?
I tend to agree with Josh. I think we've had 9 years of show me, and it's been a successful facility. I think there are legitimate concerns, however, that in my mind have been answered, but probably haven't been for the majority of the people in the room. If it's appropriate, I would like to make a motion that we table this item and give the applicant the opportunity to meet with staff, possibly meet with neighbors, to try and alleviate some of the issues and problems. Give us time as commission to perhaps think through thoughts of a potential development agreement or conditional use agreement if they do come back to us again requesting the zoning change.
There would be we could get more answers in the legal area, which sounds like it's really needed.
Could we get a second on Tom's motion?
I'll second that.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, public hearing and preliminary and final plat approval for Apple Blossom subdivision at 64 South Angel Street for Ivory Homes. If you're going to carry on a conversation, please take it out into the vestibule. Thank you. Staff, what do you have
Thank you.
for us on this?
A few weeks ago, we reviewed this property with the rezone application. It's located on Angel Street. You can see down at the bottom of the photo with parking lot for the soccer park, just to give you an orientation where it's at. Property was ultimately rezoned to R114. This plat was reviewed, or at least looked at during that rezone process. The plat has not changed. That's why we're comfortable recommending preliminary and final plat review at the same time. Here's the final plat. As you can see, the lot configuration is very similar to what you looked at with the rezone consideration. So as far as the lot layout goes, we're very comfortable with that. It meets the requirements of the R14. And the issues that were discussed during the rezone process. The one issue we do have is, as was discussed during the rezone, there's some concern with the drainage. The property has about 5 feet of fall from Angel Street to the west. The property behind is fully developed with homes across there. Creates a very difficult challenge to get the water, the front yards and the road in this area can drain to the road, but the backyards tend to drain away. It's very difficult to get the water from the backyard out to Angel Street. So the request is to put berms around the perimeter of the development. See, where did I go? Down here in the corner. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. They're showing a typical section of a swell around the back of the properties. They've done engineering calculations on the amount of stormwater that would be collected. They've sized the berm swell area in order to accommodate that water. So the proposal is to take the water from the front half of the lots and from the street and drain it back into the street, where it can surface drain out to storm drain in Angel Street, but allow the back half of the properties to be retained on site, which means a pond with no outlet. So the water would drain to the back, it would be contained, and then it would either infiltrate into the ground or evaporate over time. Their calculations show that they have almost double the capacity of what's required. So from a technical perspective, it meets the minimum requirements and actually well exceeds that. However, it's a concern.
So
a couple aspects. They'll do a very good job of letting the first people know that that's the condition, and to expect water ponding in their backyard after big rainstorms or snow melt conditions. Second or third owner probably doesn't get that message. They're coming in and complaining to the city, why do I have a puddle in my backyard? Why would you ever approve that?
Yeah.
The other thing is the swell and the berm are very difficult to regulate over time.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody wants to come and put a shed in the back corner of their property. They want it on a flat, smooth surface. Sheds under 200 square feet do not require a building permit. They go out on a Saturday, push that level, and disrupt the drainage system. So again, it does meet the minimum requirements of the city as far as drainage goes. But this is something different than we typically do. So we wanted to make sure you're aware of that before we proceed with the final approval.
All right. Thanks, Andy. There's a public hearing attached to this agenda item. Again, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We do have a timer, so if there's anybody here that wishes to speak on this, we can open the public hearing now.
Hi. Sorry this has been such a long meeting. I'll keep it short.
That's fine.
I'm Paul Hansen. I'm the property owner. I've owned it for several years, lived in Kaysville for 17 years. I have not been around for the 100-year flood, and so I can't attest to that. But for the period of time that I've been here, and even where we've had some pipe breaks and so far on this property, the water's pooled a little bit, but it's gone within a couple of hours. And even that water, it's been very, very remote. Now, here again, I don't have a 100-year flood history, but like I say, I think Andy said it best, is it meets the requirements and so forth. And I can't imagine, I mean, if a property owner comes in after the fact and changes their property on something like that, they're now liable. I can't imagine that would be a risk to the city. Anyway, that's my thought. So,
yeah. Thank you. Thought we were going to have another taker. All right, no. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing then, and we'll open it up to the commission.
I have a question for staff. You mentioned that it backs up to those 3 other houses. Do those backyards currently drain into this property?
That's a good
Or did
question.
they drain into the street? Are they adding to the problem, or are they taking away from the problem?
I don't know if I can answer that completely
Can you
accurately.
speak that, Paul? I'm sorry. Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah, if you know the
by all
answer.
means, yes.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
So I'll just kind of quick story. Ivory came in. When we first met as a public commission, one of the people said there's a pipeline that goes through there, and that was really their main concern, is that we didn't hit that pipeline. Ivory went to great expense to go find that pipeline where it is. It comes, if you don't mind.
Yep.
It comes like right off this corner right here. So they did find that. And I don't know if you can answer if there was an easement or if there's something there, but
When you say pipeline, gas?
no, it's a field drain.
Okay.
And when I bought the property, it was never disclosed. Nothing in the city has ever said anything about a field drain, but there is a field drain. These folks back there, the one here again. These guys have built up, and there's there's 2 water features. There's a big water feature here, and they've burned all this up. These guys over here, it's not so much. Okay. But there's already a burn there. Sorry. Oh, that'd be easier. Anyway.
But they're not necessarily pooling water back onto your property. And usually it is a western, where the water here usually wants to be going west.
Yeah, and I think if you think about, as at least like common sense from my perspective, and here again I haven't seen the 100-year flood, but if you're putting a cul-de-sac in here and all of that from the road and from the front of the homes is being taken out to Angel Street, now we only have half of the water that we've even been used to, and here again, like I say, in the years that I've been here, I just can't even see that being an event.
Why exactly can we not get the drainage of those others to go out to Angel like we would like?
Again, there's at least 5 feet of fall from Angel Street to the back of the property.
Right.
So
it doesn't
typically east
Got
to
it.
west, yeah. And the way they're proposing.
So, but you're saying the front ones will be able to?
There'll be a certain amount that will be able to drain to the road, and then with the cul-de-sac, they intend to build the cul-de-sac up so that the driveway's level, and then the houses will have kind of a
walkout basement.
Partially daylighted basement. So yes, they'll build this up around the front. The driveways, the front portion of the home, will drain into the cul-de-sac and out to the street. Where it slopes down from the house and down from the road, that will be that 5+ feet difference in elevation. And the storm drains, in the 3 feet range. We haven't learned how to make water flow uphill very well yet.
And I think the key is here,
Why not?
is even as Andy mentioned, that as they're proposing, it exceeds the expectation.
They've done the storm drain calculations. Yes, there is less surface area draining to those areas, but some of that surface area is now roofs and other hard surfaces, patios and those things that have a higher runoff rate than the ground that's there now. So what they have gone through the calculations, our ordinance requires that stormwater be addressed for a 10-year storm. Their calculations went to a 100-year storm just for a factor of safety. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with it, a 100-year storm is not 10 times more intense than a 10-year storm. No. What it actually is, it's the probability of a certain intensity storm occurring. So a 10-year storm means that under statistical analysis, you have a 1 in 10% chance of that storm occurring in any given year. And a 100-year storm is 1 in 100% chance of an intensity of that. So typically a 100-year storm is more on the 10 to 25% increase over a 10-year storm in intensity of rainfall. So you can go pass your professional engineer's test now that you have that information.
Andy, do you know, is this the pipeline?
That's the easement. Generically, that's where they've identified the pipe. They have exposed it. They've talked to the neighbors to the west. Our first thought was, can we use that pipe as the drain? When the homes to the west were built, that's where the pipe was found. This is an old field drain. Farmers just I wouldn't say randomly, but on their own would go out, and if their field didn't drain adequately for whatever crop they're growing, they'd bury these pipes as a way to get rid of that excess water.
So
they didn't report them to the city. They were just there.
Does it extend through the other neighbors, and where does it end?
As I understand it, maybe the applicants can address it. They've expressed it to me. It comes across here. When they were digging the footings for this home.
It's been capped.
So it's capped at the back property line, or property there somewhere.
They discovered it when they were building one of these homes. They capped it, rerouted it around the properties. They capped it at the property and then took measures on their side of the property to pick up any water that pipe may have been using in the past.
So there's no way to tie that pipe into anything else then at this point?
I won't say there's no way. There's
no
reasonable or practical efficient way to do that.
Could be that it's on just this one corner.
So does it extend to the property to the south to then, or would it be removed during development?
The remainder of that pipe?
Yeah, I'm assuming it
based on the
extends
way
through
the
the
lot
neighbor.
appears, and where that pipe would run,
it
probably is not necessary to remove it because it wouldn't interfere. If it were to go under a house, they would have to address it at that point.
I just have a quick question. So basically, when I initially heard or read the staff report, I thought berm. That's interesting. I'm just trying to figure out a berm when I was looking at this grading plan with the existing and proposed contours that we kind of have a similar rendition of we've seen today. And I'm like, okay, this is a swale, not a berm. And so it sounds like, regardless of what it is, it sounds like it's a swale at the back of these properties that is going to be a retention swale.
It's a containment area, yes.
Mm-hmm. And are you comfortable from the city engineering perspective that this proposal handles the water situation or the water concerns that were brought up when we first saw this?
I am comfortable that their calculations have been done accurately, that they address the minimum standard outlined in our ordinance. I have some discomfort with the practical situation of how people respond to it over time.
Okay. So I appreciate that. My response to that concern is if code requires, generally speaking, code requires a 10-year design storm. This is designed to a 100-year design storm. Let's say every homeowner puts a shed in the middle of the swale. Sounds like the design, in my opinion, it would still be able to handle the quantity of stormwater that would likely come onto the site in even a 100-year storm.
With the sheds?
Well, not with the sheds if it's a 100-year storm, but
you don't know. I mean, that's my concern is we don't know how things are going to change.
Well, yeah. So basically, this is what it is. It says
and the water table changes.
Not necessarily even water table, even though retention kind of alludes to that. You have a cup of water. That water holds a certain volume of, that cup holds a certain volume of water. If, in effect, this swale is a cup of water that holds a certain volume of water. It holds a 100-year design storm quantity of water. So if you put a shed in the middle of it, it now holds a 100-year design storm less the volume of the shed. So yeah, it does affect it. I agree. A 100-year design storm, but I don't think it will affect it all the way down to the volume of water that a 10-year design storm would hold, which is what the standard is to begin with.
But how do you know? I mean, how do you know that? That's the
think how many sheds that would have to be.
I don't know. I just don't know.
I think it would have to be a whole lot more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sheds. I get the point. I'm saying, and I understand Andy's concern. I'm saying I'm not as concerned about it. That's just me.
I will say that I am very concerned about it because we have over and over water issues on west of the highway, over and over and over. And I've been in those meetings, and the city council had it before, and they made a decision, and there's people calling precedent. And Leola Street is the most recent one, and there are huge issues with water retention because the fact is, even though people are supposed to retain the water on their property, it doesn't happen, and the city has a very hard time enforcing it, just like he was saying. So my neighbor grew up on the west side of town all her whole life, and she's 60 years old, and she says they used to hunt ducks over there. And so there's an issue with the table, and the table changes when additional structures are built. And structures are being built higher than the existing neighbors, and the water is running onto the existing neighbors, and it is creating flooding where there wasn't flooding before the new development. We also have the ability for new developments to put in fill, and then the height restrictions that we have in place as a city go on top of the fill. So we really don't have any protection yet as a city for the new developments to not harm the existing developments and neighbors. And so where Andy said that he has concerns about whether this is really going to handle it, I have the same concern. And I think it's a big challenge.
We hear from Ivory has their engineer here, but does that actually be appropriate to hear from him and see if we want to create this?
Yeah, that's fine. Sure.
Thank you. My name's Nick Mingo. That's my stamp right there in the corner. You asked a question to Andy. I'd like you to ask it to me. I feel 100% comfortable. I put that stamp. That says I get the liability for life. If there's a problem, any one of those people can come back to me forever. So do I feel comfortable? 100%. We talked about the 1 year or the 100-year versus 10-year storm. I call it the 1% chance versus the 10% chance. Additionally, and Andy alluded to it earlier, but I don't think you caught on, that swale is oversized even beyond what's required for the 100-year storm. So if you built a shed in it, yeah, go build a shed and it'll still accommodate the 100-year. So I've put on my belt, my suspenders, my waders, and I'm sitting in a boat. 100% safe, and if water puddles, that's okay. There's a huge design theory out there called low impact development, and that's what it does, makes the water puddle. It's not a bad thing. I understand someone's going to call and complain. Too bad. That's where they bought. You can stand in your backyard and see a low spot. I have a low spot in my backyard. It puddles. That's okay. It's not the city to go fix. It's not I understand Andy gets those calls, and that's frustrating, but it's not the city's responsibility. And if somebody comes in and fills in the entire swell, then guess whose problem it is? Theirs. They flood their neighbor. It's their responsibility.
What about the person who buys that house?
So Ivory typically will put together, as part of their purchase contract, an additional set of terms and conditions and disclaimers. One of those talks about unique easements. That easement will talk all about this, and Chase with Ivory can explain everything about it. So that's completely disclosed. That can be recorded. It's a note on the plat.
It will be recorded, or it can't be recorded?
It's typically part of the contract. In a case like this, if it became an issue, it could be recorded as a document separate.
See, I'm comfortable with if it's recorded against the property, then buyers, in perpetuity know about it.
And I think it's within our prerogative to require it to be recorded. Yeah. Whether it would be or not, we could definitely say this has to be recorded so anybody who cares about it will know about it. Right. Whether it's disclosed in a purchase and sale agreement or not, they can go look at the title and it will be there.
Right. And at the end of the day, it's their responsibility. If they change what I designed to flood their neighbor, that's on them. That's not on the city. That's not on you.
And right, and I agree with that. And where I'm at is there is, in my opinion, very, very little risk that anybody else besides these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lots are going to be affected by water. This design is oversized for the water.
There's more risk of being affected today
than
after this is
This is going to improve the situation.
Yes.
So I agree with Laureen that water is absolutely an issue and something that we need to be concerned about. But I think, in my opinion, this addresses more than adequately the concerns with water on this property.
So on Leola Street, it was not one developer that did it. They were just all individual properties purchased, and different people did different things. And so there wasn't a cohesive plan for the stormwater management, and it wasn't a problem for any of them until the new developments went in behind them, which is more recent. In the last 2-3 years, a lot of flooding and meetings, and I attended those meetings to learn. And so I understand this one's perhaps better because there is a cohesive plan for this new development. I'm still just wondering why do people have French drains? We have a French drain around my house. Are there not other ways that we can handle the water so that there's not...
Well, yeah, so this spot right here is naturally the low corner of the site. The site drains that way. We could build a retaining wall 5 or 6 feet high and
But the water seeps, I've noticed and learned about how it goes under and then can saturate and...
But I don't think that we can limit the development just because these people happen to be uphill from the development next door. There is a little bit of inherent risk of I'm downhill from you. Whatever lands on your property is probably coming to mine.
But the way I look at this, that's not even going to happen here.
No,
they're keeping it all on site. But I think what Lorene is saying.
Well, that's what I want to know.
Well, so it's interesting, and I'll just offer this. You mentioned this land drain pipe. That still exists over here and then down the road. Chase went and dug it up and found it. I went out and surveyed it. We mapped it. Then we asked the neighbor if we could connect to it. Hell no. So they want their cake and eat it too, right? I'm concerned about the water, but no, don't use the one logical thing that's available to get rid of it.
And I was curious, why it was capped off, because that could have been a help.
I mean, we didn't go chase it around for 2 weeks and dig up half this field to find it for no reason. So
I think you guys are right, though. Right now, the way this is designed, the water's retaining pretty much within
the people
those
that have
residents.
An issue also have the solution.
Yeah.
If anybody has a concern, they have the solution.
Yeah.
So if, worst case, something catastrophic happens down the road, they're in complete control to resolve it. But, that's well beyond the 1% chance.
And they would have to go after...
their neighbors.
And that's the problem now, right? That's the issue that's happening on Leola. Go after your neighbors.
There's people making those claims. For years, the city has, in my opinion, done very well on these issues. We've had relatively very few complaints. As I understand the law, you have certain responsibility for your water, but nature is nature, and water has the right to go where it's always gone, as long as you don't mess with it too much. If you increase the volume, if you concentrate it, those kind of things, then you take on liability. If it's the same water going the same way it's always gone, the water has the right, the property owner has the right to allow it to do that. We have had complaints recently. Some of them are maybe justified. Some of them are probably less justified. Again, I don't disagree with anything Mr. Mingo has said. I think it meets all the requirements. This is enough different that I want to make sure the approving bodies, the political side, knows what's going on and understands it as well.
Yeah, I'm concerned about how people can change berms, and if that's one of the methods that's trying to contain it. I know that the city has a very hard time, watching that into the future.
We can hire 200 more Lyles to go walk everybody's backyard every day to make sure they don't.
Exactly. People are pretty upset in Kaysville about enforcement. So I'm not against the development, and I know it's trying to be done super well. But I'm definitely concerned about water, enough so that I'm going to a meeting downtown to learn about stormwater even more November 30th. we have a challenge in Kaysville, here and there,
Here and there.
Here and there we do. So, anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, right. Did you have anything else to add, Lauren?
Not unless anyone else has something to help me understand how. I know that we can't guarantee against the Mother Nature always and forever, but just wondering why we have this going on, and we do. The council has had to deal with it, so.
Well, this is where we have to trust in civil engineering too. So it's.
I like it. It's nice when they don't have to go after their neighbor when there's. And I thought the gentleman said that he also, they have some liability, but I don't know how that all works.
Motion?
I will make a motion that we recommend approval of a preliminary and final plat for the Apple Blossom subdivision consisting of 7 lots, 2.98 acres at 64 South Angel Street for Ivory Homes, with the condition that the retention swale at the back of each lot be recorded on the plat and on the title to each lot. Is that adequate? Okay.
Second.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Did I?
You didn't vote.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Good. All right. Thank you. Moving forward, agenda item number 4, interpretation of Kaysville City Ordinances 1732-2 off-street parking and 1731-35 with telecommunication towers based on an issue out in West Kaysville that we have actually approved some time ago. City staff, please.
You mentioned, you probably recall, we approved a conditional use permit for telecommunication tower down near the intersection of Angel Street and 200 North just recently. They pursued that, brought in the building permit. The building department reviewed the site plan and the proposal and believe that they should be required to have paved access to the cell tower based on the ordinances. As we reviewed the ordinances, there's a little bit of unclarity in that regard. So rather than enforcing this, make them go through an appeal, we just come to you for some interpretation of the ordinance so that we can proceed with this one. The question at hand is a cell tower required to have paved access? Many of the ordinances were included in your packet that apply to it. What the building department was looking at in particular was the phrase in 1732-2, 6C, which says every parcel of land hereafter used as a public parking area shall be paved with an asphalt, cement, or Portland concrete surface. I think the counter to that argument, where it says that it shall have a paved surface, is number one, is a cell tower. Well, let me back up just a second. 1732-2, which you received, number one, where it says general, it says at the time of erection of any main building, then these requirements apply. So the question is a cell tower a main building, and therefore these requirements apply? There's some question as to whether they're even required to have a public parking area. There's certainly a lot of good reasons to have a paved access, but regardless of the good reasons, we're bound by the ordinance, and that's what we can require. So we'd like the Planning Commission to help us understand or interpret the ordinance as to whether paved access should be or is required under the ordinance for a telecommunications tower. Is that adequate? I can go on forever if you want me to, but I think that's enough.
That'd be good. We can open it up. There's no public hearing on this, so.
So I have a question. Is access restricted to the area of the cell tower that would need servicing? And if so, how is it restricted?
Typically, the area of the cell tower is fenced in. I believe that was a requirement in the conditional use permit. So the tower sits here. The 20 by 20 or 30 by 30, whatever it is, area of the tower itself is fenced with their equipment inside the fence. They have agreed to this. This is a parking lot that's paved here. They have agreed to put a road base or gravel surface access to the tower, just to help with some of the concerns. So,
and so the access where the road, whatever material it's made up of, I assume that will be an easement. They don't own the property from the trash enclosure down to the.
The owner of this property has agreed to allow that access easement.
Okay, so it is an easement, and the owner of the easement would be the operator of and owner of the cell tower, and so I guess what I'm getting at with that line of questioning is 1732-2-6C says every parcel of land hereafter used as a public parking area. I don't think this is public, so I don't know that applies. That's my interpretation of that portion of it. And then my interpretation of 1732-2-1 is I think it's fitting a round peg in a square hole, or vice versa, whatever it is, to say that this is a main building.
It's not.
I don't think it qualifies as a main building, no. And therefore, in my mind, I think the main concern, at least I read in the staff report, with not paving it is that vehicles would get stuck and there would be mud and dirt tracked into the streets. Vehicles getting stuck, in my opinion, isn't as much a concern for the cities as much as it is the people who would be maintaining it, the owners of the cell tower. If they don't want their trucks getting stuck in mud, then put a paved or a well-graded gravel road on there. What the city's concern, where the city does have a legitimate concern, is that the mud, if there was nothing there, would get tracked onto the streets, and I think that concern can be addressed by a well-graded and compacted gravel access. So
which they've agreed to. But
what the city was, the question is, do we require paving, asphalt paving, or are we okay with well-graded gravel? Is that correct?
That's the question before you tonight.
Yeah. I feel exceptionally comfortable with well-compacted and graded gravel.
I
think
I do too.
Yeah.
I'd feel less
I-
comfortable if this opened directly onto a street,
But it
honestly,
doesn't. It
they've got to
doesn't.
go across 100 yards of parking lot
On
that
top
the
of
city
that.
doesn't care about anyway if it gets mud on it.
Right.
But they're different owners, right?
The question at hand is not, is this acceptable, but
Is the ordinance.
does the ordinance require pavement or not?
And I think, in my opinion, the answer to that is no.
No.
And I think you addressed that first. And
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so then
I agree.
we can just end it there. That's my
Okay, well, I'm not an attorney, but I am in public administration and the law currently. So I went through and I highlighted where I thought there were significant things, and that is 1732-2, 3E, in a commercial zone. So this is kind of a commercial sort of a thing, the cell tower, right? And it just talks about proximity. So that's just something that I caught my eye. And then again, same area but down under 6C, every parcel of land hereafter used as a public parking area shall be paved. So paved, and I know it's not parking to go out to that, but
Nor is it public.
nor is it public, yep. But if it has to go across property that is currently general commercial, and they may be kind of upset if it's, if they get all the dirt and the gravel or whatever, so that's a thought. Then 1732-3, number 1, off-street loading space. Who knows why I highlighted that. So then 1731-25, number 4. I think I just was remembering Matt's original comment about that one. Let me just check my last highlight here. So, yeah, this is perhaps the most relevant. 1731-25, number 5. So, professional engineer, that the design of the facility meets all applicable standards for the facility, including, but not limited to, so not limited to, the safety, the material, the design integrity, the wind, and the seismic safety. And so certainly it is a good question to ask. And I guess for me it comes down to if they have to go down and go across the parking lot and make that parking lot messy, those people might not really appreciate that. So I don't know how often or if anyone really cares, how great the quality of the gravel road is. Maybe it'll be fine.
Well, I think the one concern you raised is that this parking lot's going to get muddy,
Yep.
in a sense. The owner of this property is the one giving this access easement, and of course, I haven't read the easement. I would imagine that it has some provisions that would give this owner a remedy for those problems. And I imagine that the telecommunications tower owner would want to be a good neighbor, especially to be able to maintain their easement, and would quickly address any problems with mud tracking into this parking lot. And so that, in my opinion, that's entirely a private matter between two private entities that the private market, if you will, would very quickly take care of, probably faster than the public, than the city would. So that on that one, I'm not as concerned myself with that.
Was that addressed? I wasn't here when this was approved, but there had to have been some discussion, because they're getting access to cross over another property. Was that discussed?
I don't recall it being discussed, and I think for many of the same reasons I just mentioned.
There would have to be some type of an agreement between those, the cell tower owner and the property owner.
It's a private matter, too.
Yeah, it's a private matter that I don't think
Do we know
would entail
if-
the public.
the owner of the property's here if you'd like to ask him.
Do we need to? Sure.
Yeah, we'll ask him.
Sure.
Rock Shooter. Let me just say a couple of quick things. We got the conditional use permit. This didn't come up in that part of it, but in the building permit portion, this came up kind of after the fact. To me, the whole issue is we're asking for a temporary reprieve from any paving requirement. The property is currently under development, It's probably going to be developed in the near term, and so we offered, the property owner and the cell company offered to settle this with compacted road base and compacted gravel. It's not public. Public does not go to the cell site. So a gravel base from the parking lot to the cell site, probably one technician a month might come in there. So it's only an issue as far as being messy in inclement weather, and it gets very little activity. Once the site is built, nobody will see anybody there. So it makes a lot of sense for a temporary reprieve from any paving requirement, and because it'll be torn up in the further development of the property.
Well, and as long as the other owner is fine with it, I don't think that is a private matter. That doesn't concern us.
Yeah, the easements that are offered over and across the parking lot is available to all owners, including the leasehold interest for the cell site. So it works for all the property owners.
And if and when this parcel gets developed, it's probably in the interest of this owner and or the city to try, if possible, to get this paved or make sure there's a paved access back there anyway. And so that's always an option too.
It will be, the distance from any paved area will be shorter and shorter in future development. So it may end up being a 15-foot area instead of what it is now going forward. So it will take care of itself in development.
Thank you.
But I think the short answer to the question before us is no. The city, or no, in my interpretation of the ordinances that are applicable here, no, a paved access, meaning asphalt paving, is not required.
Correct. And I agree with that. Do we need a motion for this, or?
I think we would, yeah, just to make sure we're all in agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or
Can I?
It doesn't have to be unanimous.
Can I say so moved?
So moved.
Second.
You're up.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next item in our agenda is call the public.
And we have some public tonight. Yes. She borrowed all my materials, so pay attention.
My name is Marianne Thurgood, and I'm here with some concerns regarding detached structures and the new height codes and its impact on property owners. The building code for unattached structures was changed 6 months ago. It almost doubled the maximum height allowance without significantly changing the setback of these buildings. In general, and this is my understanding from speaking with Mr. Gibson, is that the new height code was basically to accommodate larger recreational vehicles that owners wanted to store on their property. For whatever reason, the setback requirements did not change in proportion to the taller structures. Rather, an architectural design change in the roof was implemented instead. This, however, did not change the impact of the structure's wall height, especially when it's placed just 5 feet from a fenced property line. This has been, other issues have been brought up, and I brought some sample structures. A lot of times on paper it looks neat and tidy, but then when you get out into the public area and see it physically, it has taken on a different meaning. And from my understanding, the code has already had some other concerns expressed to Mr. Gibson, and this is a topic that's going to come up for update and change probably around the first of the year. So, but my concern is what's happening in the meantime. So my goal for being here tonight is basically to put a request, a moratorium on construction of unattached structures that are allowed as a result of the changes made 6 months ago to height and setback requirements. And in talking to a couple of the commission members, they were not aware of this code 6. You didn't have a chance to even review this before the city council made the changes. Is that correct?
No, it was presented to us.
I think
we talked about it and,
we did
and
discuss
went through
it.
a pretty lengthy discussion on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
sometimes it's hard to anticipate the unforeseen things that are allowed, if that makes sense.
yes,
Right.
So basically, building an unattached structure with heights upwards of 24 feet or more, and some structures, according to some of the building permits that I reviewed, as big as 3,000 to 4,000 square feet in size, has created some ugly issues for residential neighbors sharing a fence line with these buildings. This one is, since it's been a 6-month time period, a lot of the buildings aren't completed. But this is a 2-story, 3,400 square foot detached garage. It's actually going to be 2 stories. And already you can see the first story lines up with probably the bottom of the roof line of the house behind it. The actual homeowner is to the right of the picture there, so they have a long, narrow property. So it doesn't, it's built quite a ways from the actual home, but it's going to be a fairly large structure out the back of the other resident there. The next one. And this one, they do have the foundation in, but that was about all. This is on the building permit. It's a 1-story, 1,300 square foot structure. And from my understanding of a 1-story, it could still be the 24 feet tall. Is that correct?
Yeah, story itself does not have a specific height limitation.
Right. So on the building permit, they just put 1-story, but that 1,300 square foot building could be 24 feet tall. So that was one of the larger square foot ones that I visited on site. And the next one. This one is over 1,200 square feet. It's a 1-story building, but you can see it is the 24 feet. I didn't put that down, but it is 24 feet. It was centered along the back fence of a neighbor's property, squarely in the middle of their backyard. It occupies 40% of the neighbor's residential fence line, and it's 40 feet from their backyard. So when you increase the height, this particular person only needs it for a garage, but he thought, oh, what the heck, I'll go ahead and make it 24 feet, even though he only needs 13 to 15 feet high to house his vans. And you're obviously familiar with your own provisions as a city commission, but just to highlight that your mission statement is to promote. One of those areas that you're promoting is aesthetics of the city, and to protect property values. These oversized structures neither enhance the aesthetic quality of the community nor protect the property values for neighbors. This one particular structure has dictated where gardens can be planted because of diminished sunlight hours. It's going to require an expense of planting large trees to hide the massiveness of the unattractive walls. And it dramatically is restricting available vistas. Also, because the height aspect of it, the backyard is basically being enclosed with a commercial build-out environment. And so you walk out you go out on your patio and all you see is a wall. Now, to compound this, and I'm kind of looking at the bigger picture here, many issues overlap and compound the final outcome or purpose for requesting these types of building permits. Issues include that compound this building aspect are family-owned businesses, agricultural needs, mixed zoning districts, other structures on property, and intended use. The next statement there. I really think that a broader process of filtering and physically reviewing all these aspects of building a building on a property should be examined before a permit is granted. For example, a family-owned home business is the building intended use for handling vehicles and equipment and materials or the family-owned business codes and compliance. If the family home business code limits the number of vehicles on the property, why are you allowing a building permit for an unattached garage for the vehicles that are not in compliance with the family home business code? Another issue, conditional use standards. In the code, obviously, improvements in the vicinity. I don't see these taller structures as being an improvement in the vicinity that they're being built. Are they being monitored for design and exterior finishes that are compatible with the surrounding environment? Are they providing landscaping? And is what they're doing, if with the family home business, an attractive nuisance? So are any of these questions asked when a family home business resident asks for a building permit? You know what? I didn't see any of that on the building permit request, in the sense that, are you going to put landscaping around it? What's your exterior finishing going to be? All they include is siding. On all the building permits that I looked at, it just said siding. Well, that doesn't define compatibly with how they're going to blend in with the surrounding community. So I'm going to kind of highlight a couple of things related to attractive nuisances. An unattractive condition would be having a commercial-sized 24-foot high by 1,250 square foot unattached garage being used to store multiple home business vehicles that's built closer to the neighbor's back door than the home business owner's back door. Another issue, big time with this, is where the mixed-use zoning comes into play. You have your agricultural home occupation interest. In the backyard is a whole new development of residential homes. And in a mixed zone district such as an RA, I think it's crucial to have this broader picture of how does that structure fit in as the backdoor neighbor of a whole new residential area. I think I have the agriculture. Yeah, there it is. So down at the bottom, basically it gives the power to you as the Planning Commission to kind of oversee these home occupation regulations are put in place. One, landscaping shall be required to screen parking areas outside storage from the view of the adjacent landowners and public roadways. Well, the third structure was so close to the fence, there's no way that landscaping can be put in there. Well, why wasn't that addressed before the building permit was okayed? Are you going to have a big enough setback that you can put landscaping in so the back door neighbor doesn't have to wake up every morning and out of their bedroom window to see a big, tall, silver wall. And then also the Planning Commission has the right to increase the setbacks of buildings like this as it's being used for agricultural home occupation needs. I didn't see that on any of the, as a step or a filtering system for even having the building permit granted. There was no way of, and I'm not saying that you have to review every building permit for an unattached garage, but where there is a family home business or an agricultural business, it says right there that there should be some more intervention before that building structure is okayed. And then my interpretation of the last one is the Planning Commission has the authority to intervene to make sure the criteria has been acted upon by the owner of the property even after the attached structure has been built. And my interpretation of that might be incorrect, but so anyway, I didn't see any of this kind of intervention for the last building, the last structure that we saw. They have a family home business. They should have had that brought up as part of their granting of the building permit. And then other issues related to zoning. An unattractive condition would be if the landowner places a large unattached structure on the perimeter of the property because other buildings, including the second unattached building being rented to tenants, has filled up the interior property areas. Why should another unattached building permit be granted to an owner who is not compliant with the zoning laws in his or her use of another unattached building on the property? So again, that's something that I think has to be more specifically addressed before the building permit is granted. So basically, just filling out a sheet, checking off, yep, it's one story, it's going to have siding. My plan said it's going to be 17 feet, but now that the code has changed to 24, what the heck, I'm just going to build a 24-foot structure. It just seems like there's a lot of, you're giving them permission to build the building, but then they interpret that in any way that they want to as they're finishing up the final project. And I know there's steps along the way to measure height and things like that, but all these other aspects are never even looked at. Well, I feel like I've rambled here, but my mouth is dry after 3 hours of sitting in this meeting. But basically, there's 3 things, and you can kind of discard that. I don't need that last thing.
I thought that last, I didn't know if you'd have other slides, but that last one was curious because it talks about the Planning Commission, and yet these sort of things don't even come before us, right? They're handled by staff. Right, we don't see these at all come through, which is something else
Well, I think that's a parenthetical that is an interpretation of what the code says.
Yeah, that it could come before us, right.
Well, right.
But in the approval process for all of these kinds of structures, they do not individually come through, before us. It's interesting.
And that's that idea of a broader process for physically filtering the building permits based upon other factors that come into play on their property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, good. So sorry to have you. You can go back.
No. So just to summarize again, and another example, I was talking to a developer 2 days ago about this issue, and he said, well, it just so happens I was out jogging in my neighborhood, and I'd never noticed this one structure that some people had put in their backyard. And he said, it was huge. That's what it was enough that he had noticed it. And he specifically said to me, I wonder what the neighbors behind that structure are thinking. So it's an issue. I think it was not, and there's a lot of factors that go into a final acceptance or approval of a building code. And I think it was probably more specific to those recreational vehicles that had that much space between their fence and the garage. And so they couldn't have a greater setback because there was no room for a setback. But I think it can be applied to every structure, and so that was where the problem came in with the setback. So I just feel like if you're going to have that large of a building, you've got to have a greater setback. So in the meantime, I would like to see a moratorium on the construction of unattached structures that are allowed as a result of the changes made 6 months ago to the height and setback requirements. I'd like this Commission and the City Council to look at developing a broader process of filtering and physically reviewing the compound issues of specific requests before a building permit is granted. And finally, I would like to see the Planning Commission step forward to manage landscaping and setback regulations related to home businesses before permits are granted. And Dave?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Planning Commission members and staff, I appreciate your patience. It's been a long night. I've been in your seats before as a fellow public administrator, and I like being on that side better.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to lend my voice, my support, my experience to what Marianne here said. I'm Jay Boffman, by the way. And I'm the one standing in that picture there where that building dwarfs me. So it's been hard to build a home and have laws that have been changed since you purchased the land and built the home, and these changes are made, and they allow for these things to pop up, like a building 25 feet tall, 5 feet from the fence, and now when we wake up in the morning and look out our window, all we see is that barn. So the law was changed to allow higher buildings, and then the setback requirement was eliminated. And that doesn't sound right to me, and it's causing problems for my family, and it's causing problems for other people we've talked to. With the growth going on in West Kaysville, there's this intermixing of this residential agricultural and single-family residences, and it is causing problems because honestly, it's like the Wild West out there with what they can build and what they can do. And you're going to see more and more of these clashes as people are allowed to build because the law allows them to, and there's no judgment process allowed to determine if that's actually what is best for the community. When they build it 5 feet from the property line rather than 5 feet from the driveway, it doesn't make sense. The purpose of that building is for them to drive their vehicles into it, and yet they chose and were allowed to build it closer to our house than to their buildings. Because there was no just go in, get the permit, check the boxes, sure, you can build it now. But there was no judgment made about whether or not that actually was good to do. And then, after they filed the permit and they began construction, they were allowed to change what they actually did, and there's no repercussions for deviating from the permit. So, anyway, I'm sorry for taking your time and getting emotional here, but it's been hard.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks for all the research. Boy, that's just really rare that someone really does all the research to figure it out.
So now, this is, I mean, from my understanding of this, actually, I talked to Andy and Lyle about this earlier. I mean, this is, since it really wasn't an agenda item, we take this whole presentation and that and stuff and refer it to city staff for further review and input, and then get it on an agenda, and then we discuss it and move forward from there. So,
Yeah.
right. So,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you for your time and coming forward. I appreciate it. Other matters that properly become before the Planning Commission: reports, correspondence, calendar. Lyle?
Well, I was going to put you through another 10-minute training tonight, but I think we're all ready to get out of here, so we'll save that for
Thanks.
another time. We discussed it last meeting, Thanksgiving.
Right.
In fact, it is Thanksgiving Day. Thank you, Tom. So the 30th of November is the next meeting. We do have some items there, so beyond that, I believe...
Do we know about the referendum yet? If they got enough signatures?
They are still working on gathering those. Their deadline has not come to...
Monday's the deadline. Thank you.
So we will know between now and the next meeting whether that appeal process that we've also discussed previously needs to ensue based on those signatures.
Thank you.
So we'll keep you posted and cut it out at that.
All right. Get a motion to adjourn then.
Move that we adjourn.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.